My name's Olivia Hart. I'm 32. And the morning my parents left my 8-year-old daughter at an airport while they boarded first class with my sister's family. I finally understood that in our house, family had always been a password to other people's comfort. Not a promise of safety. Ellie's laces were double-knotted. Neon, against her sneakers. She ran on orange juice and adrenaline. Checking her small backpack every 5 minutes, like a pilot headphones. Coloring book. The blue pen that writes faster. And Clover, the stuffed rabbit, whose ears have gone thin from being believed in. My parents, Linda and George, had invited her to Florida with my sister Harper, her husband Nate, and their boys. Sunshine. Theme parks. A souvenir wallet for loose quarters. I couldn't get time off. So, at the curb, I pressed a kiss into Ellie's hair. Tasted the shampoo. She swears smells like clouds. And told myself the oldest lullaby I know. It's family. She's safe. At 7:50 a.m. Mom texted a photo of Ellie, at the gate thumbs up. Gap-toothed grin. One pigtail already losing the battle. My shoulders dropped. I saved the picture. 2 hours later. My phone buzzed again in the family chat. We all voted that she should stay. I stared at the sentence, waiting for the grin behind the joke to show its face. It didn't. I called. Straight to voicemail. I called again near dinner. The background was laughter. Ice clinking. The hum of a shuttle. Put Ellie on, I said. The countertop still dusted with the sugar from the pancakes we'd abandoned that morning. Mom's tone was weirdly calm. Didn't you get our message? What message? The one that said she should stay. She was acting up. So we went to family services. They've got an agency. She's fine. Family services. An agency. The world went sharp and far away at once. I don't remember Mickey's. Only my hands shaking on the wheel and how the streetlights turned every intersection into an interrogation room. Here's the part people question. So let me be exact. The airline's family services desk placed Ellie on a short-term care hold, with a contracted caregiver after the accompanying adults declined to travel with her. They accepted my mother's signature and the reservation record, which listed my parents as accompanying adults. They did not have my written consent. My number wasn't set as the primary contact on that booking. Mom's was. By the time I reached the desk, the caregiver's address had already been texted to me per policy. I would argue about that policy later. That night, it only mattered that my daughter was not where I trusted she would be. Neutral walls. The lemon cleaner smell of someone else's living room. A couch too deep for small legs. Ellie looked up as I came through the door. Clover unterherrschen. Knees tucked like she was keeping herself from spilling. I waited. Mommy, she whispered. She didn't run to me. She checked first if this was another door that only looked like home. That was the hinge. People think the story starts at the airport. It doesn't. The airport was simply the loudest version of what my family had always been. For as long as I remember. Harper has been the golden child. The artist. The dreamer. Rules slide around her like water, finding a new path. I'm the responsible one. Family code for the person who cleans up everyone else's mess and says thank you for the opportunity. When Harper misplaced her campus job checks before senior exhibit fees were due, Mom called me. You make more. Sweetheart. I sent $450. When Harper's tenants broke their lease, I covered 2 mortgage payments, $1. $200 each, because the bank is being dramatic. When Dad's truck died on a Find Your Spark road trip, Harper organized. My card ate the $640 tow, and the $300 replacement he promised to cover when the bonus hits. The bonus never hit my account. There was the studio Harper couldn't afford first and last month's rent. 2美元. 750. The family reconnection cabin I reserved because I'm so good at booking $900. The orthodontist copay for Harper's eldest when Nate's hours were cut $950. The florist deposit for her friend's opening $250 because you're reliable. A brand name gaming console or they'll be crushed $499. I kept receipts like a person tucking away proof of a weather system no one else could see. In the margin of one I'd written, it's family. It'll come back around. Under it, smaller. When? I should have known. waits at the threshold of every memory now. I should have known, when Mom's gratitude always arrived wrapped in obligation. We've always invested in each other. I should have known when Harper said, "You're the organized one." Like a compliment with a leash. I should have known when Dad toasted Harper at Thanksgiving, our brave one, while I carved the turkey and silently calculated how many overdraft fees I'd covered that year so this dinner could exist. So when they offered to take Ellie to Florida, I wanted so badly to believe it was an olive branch. I paid for the flights, the hotel, the park passes, the matching shirts with the midnight group slogan. Harper texted like a gift. The cart total blinked $3. 980. I closed my eyes, exhaled, and clicked confirm. Buying into a future where the ledger might finally balance felt like a kind of prayer. On the drive home from the caregiver's apartment, Ellie fell asleep mid-sentence. Clover jammed against her cheek, breath catching on the edge, like the end of a sob. The next morning, Mom sent another text. Hope she was fine. We're wheels up. Don't make this a big deal. Attached my parents at the gate. Sunglasses. Harper's family behind them, the boys making faces, lime wedges on a tray of salt. Rimmed drinks. An hour later my statement updated $128 at the terminal bar. Service included. I stared at the charge until the numbers lost their shapes. People say. Confront them. Set boundaries. I had tried. Boundaries in my family turn translucent fast. Sea glass held up to the light, pretty thin. Useful for decoration. Once, Harper asked to borrow my car for a week while Nate's was in the shop. I said no. I needed it for work. Mom called within the hour. Warm and disappointed. Honey. It's just a week. It returned 2 weeks later with an empty tank and a $65 ticket mailed to me. Another time, Dad asked for $500 for a leaky pipe. 2 days later, he posted a selfie on a rented boat. Spontaneous lake day. The neighbor fixed the pipe as a favor. The $500 became a story I told myself at night to stay angry enough to stay awake. The day after the airport, Ellie watched pancake batter bubble and asked if Clover could sit on the counter. Clover wants to see, she said. Clover can see, I told her, and tried not to let my hands shake. She poked her pancake and said, very carefully, Grandma said I was too loud. Grandpa said, we need quiet. And Aunt Harper said, we all voted. I thought it was a game. She looked down. Did I lose? I didn't cry. I won't make my child carry my tears. No. Sweetheart. I said. You won. She studied my face like it was a map and, slowly, some small piece of faith clicked back into place. Breadcrumbs. That's what your mind leaves when you've been lost in the wrong forest too long. The way Mom says we when she means Harper. The way Dad goes silent when the word money enters a sentence. As if not speaking makes the bill lose your scent. The way Harper turns apology into performance. I'm doing my best. Okay. And every favor into fate. You were meant to help me. I think about the cabin deposit and the master bedroom for the kids. About the pull-out couch, whose spring found my ribs at 3 a.m. Well, I tried not to be the kind of person who minds. I think about carving turkey under Dad's toast. I think about the empty tank and the parking ticket with my name on a decision I didn't make. Little flares. Ignored. The airport only gave the pattern a sound system. That night, once Ellie fell asleep for real, Clover tucked under her chin like a lighthouse. I scrolled through the family chat and reread the messages until they were just shapes. She was acting up. Don't be dramatic. We handled it. The photograph from 750 a.m. The gap-toothed grin sat next to. We all voted that she should stay like a before and after you show in court. If I could print the feeling the words gave me, it would be a thin sheet of ice over deep water. One wrong step and under you go. I opened my laptop and created a document. I didn't call it vengeance. I called it what we owe. Dates. Amounts. Screenshots. If I couldn't prove it, it didn't go in. Not anger. Math. I would find out later how much the total was. For now, the act of writing steadied my hands. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, remembering its job. I should have known. I said to the empty room. The echo answered. You did. You just hadn't acted yet. The next days would be about acting, about learning that the only vote that matters is the one I cast for my kid and myself. But part 1 ends here. Where truth stops whispering and starts writing itself down. Where a mother who has kept the lights on decides who gets to stand in the glow. Where a rabbit with thin ears becomes a witness. Where I stop calling survival love. Where the promise I make is simple and final, Ellie will never wait on a stranger's couch for me again. The morning after I titled the document What We Owe, I woke up before my alarm. The sky that not quite color that makes everything feel undecided. Ellie was still asleep. Clover's ear tucked under her chin like a page marker. I made coffee and opened the laptop. Numbers first. If I was going to stop being the family solution, I needed a record that didn't blink when someone raised their voice. I drew 4 columns. Date. What it was. Amount. Proof. If I couldn't substantiate it with a receipt. Transfer. Invoice. Or screenshot. It didn't go in. Memory had been used against me before. You're exaggerating. You're tired. You misunderstood, so I chose a language that didn't care how charming anyone was. June 4. Utility bridge to prevent shutoff at my parents' house, $700 bank confirmation. August 12, orthodontist copay for Harper's oldest, $950 clinic invoice plus mom's text, you're a lifesaver. October 28, water heater repair at Linda and George's, $1. $100 work order. Plus, my card authorization. December 19, family reconnection cabin deposit, $900 booking confirmation. February 2, tow for dad's truck breakdown, $640 receipt. March 3. Emergency truck replacement for dad, $2. $300 purchase receipt. Plus dad's text. Bonus will square this. Promise. May 18. 2 months of Harper's mortgage after tenant bailed, $2. 400 transfers. Her voice note. 2 paintings by month's end. Swear. July 9. First and last month's rent for Harper's studio, $2. 750 lease. Email chain. September 22. Gallery flowers for Harper's friend, $250 florist invoice. Harper first, I owe you. Serious. November 28 gaming console for the boys, $499 receipt. January 17 quiet overdraft cover to protect my parents' rent check, $310 bank screenshot. February 9, Florida package flights divided by hotel divided by park passes, $3. 980 consolidated statement. Plus the airport bar tab, $128. By the time Ellie padded out in socks and announced that Clover requires oatmeal, my running total had already swallowed a month's rent and kept going. I closed the laptop and made breakfast. Ellie sprinkled cinnamon with the focus of a surgeon. Clover needs a passport sleeve, she said. Matter of fact. Because travel is rough. I smiled. Add it to your list. While she ate, my phone pinged. A message from Harper. We landed. Please stop spiraling. She was fine. We did family services by the book. I stared at by the book long enough to feel my jaw click. I typed and deleted twice. Before sending a single line, I picked my daughter up from a stranger's living room without my consent on file. Don't text me the word, fine. 3 dots pulsed and disappeared. A few minutes later, Mom chimed in separately. Let's not escalate. We handled it safely. You need rest. I didn't answer. Rest is an old script, the assumptive diagnosis used to shrink a woman's objection to the size of a nap. After school drop-off, I called the airline's family services line. The representative was professional, and the policy clear in a way that made me colder when accompanying adults listed on the reservation declined to fly with a minor, and the primary contact authorizes. The desk can place the child in the care of a contracted provider for safety. In our case, the primary contact listed was my mother. Because she had made the booking. No. They did not have my written consent. Yes. They had a record of my retrieval. No. They would not apologize in writing. They would record my concerns. I asked to update the booking file for future travel primary contact. Olivia Hart only. And a note that no third-party placement is permitted without my written authorization. Understood. The representative said. Typing. The sound of the keys felt like a small hammer hitting a small nail into something that would hold. Back home. I added one more line to the spreadsheet. March 14. Lost wages from leaving work early to retrieve Ellie $280 timesheet adjustment. It wasn't money any of them had asked for. But it was money I'd paid. The ledger wasn't just a series of rescues. It was a map of my time. Attention. Sleep. The corners I'd cut for everyone else's emergencies until my own needs lived under the floorboards. At noon. Dad called. He always opens with weather when the topic is dangerous. Winds up today. He said. You good? You left Ellie at an airport. I said. Skipping weather. He went quiet. Then tried for reasonable. Your mother talked to the desk. They said it was safe. We would have missed the flight. You know how these tickets work. Non-refundable. And the boys were keyed up. Non-refundable tickets aren't a reason to abandon a child. I said. You made a decision that would have been unthinkable if the child's mother had been standing there. That's the point. He exhaled. You're right to be upset. I'm right. I said. Full stop. He didn't argue. He did what he always does when a sentence is heavier than he wants to lift. Change the angle. You've always been good with details. He said. Maybe too good. I let the silence sit until he heard how that sounded. He cleared his throat. What do you need from us now? It was the first time anyone had asked that question, without a price hidden in it. I wrote it down on a sticky note as if documenting it would keep it from evaporating. I need accountability. I said. Not a circle of people telling me I'm tired. After we hung up, I texted my coworker Paige. Who is the kind of person you call when you need a sentence to stand up? If you were going to make a claim against family without turning it into a bonfire, where would you start? She replied. With documentation. And posture. Facts only. Think invoices. Not essays. A minute later. And if you need a lawyer recommendation, I've got one who speaks spreadsheet. I didn't reply yet. Part of me was still bargaining with the idea that this could be solved with one good conversation and a shared timeline. That the text we all voted that she should stay was a fluke. Not a thesis. Then a new message landed from Harper in the family chat, a photo of my parents and her family by a resort pool. Drinks bright as traffic cones. Captioned. Making the best of things. I watched the bubbles of comments stack underneath from cousins and friends, hearts. Clapping hands. Family first, and felt something line up inside me, like a level finally finding center. I went back to the spreadsheet. The total had crept past $20. Ling. Then $30. Ling. And the numbers kept walking. It wasn't just the money, it was the pattern the numbers made. An EKG of a family that had been borrowing my pulse. I added 3 small lines I'd almost excused away. April 7 Uber rides when Harper borrowed my car for a day and kept it 2 weeks $86 plus $43 plus $29 receipts. April 22 parking ticket issued to my plate during Harper's borrow $65 citation. May 2 groceries for Sunday dinner I was told would be reimbursed $128 receipt plus mom will square later. In the proof column, I began labeling screenshots with 2 colors red boxes around the requests. Blue boxes around the thank yous that almost but not kite. Counted as promises. It made a picture even a bystander could understand. At pickup, Ellie handed me a construction paper travel map she'd drawn for Clover. Each stop looked like a square with a flag. This is home base, she said, tapping the biggest one. Only you have the key. I nodded so she could see me hear her. Only me, I said. We added a key icon together. A tiny rectangle with a triangle tooth. Back home, I stacked all the physical receipts by category parents. Harper. Group and slid each stack into a clear sleeve, like I was archiving a storm. I wasn't pretending this was normal anymore. I was building a spine for a story that had always been wobbly because I was carrying it alone. That evening, Harper called. Her voice had that bright varnish she uses when she wants to reshape a scene. Okay, she said. Let's reset. Everyone was stressed. Ellie had a moment. We did what we had to. We all landed safe. Can we drop the vibe? Drop the vibe. I repeated. Is that what we're calling child safety now? You're being intense. She said. This is what you do. You turn everything into a report. I'm making a record. I said. That's what people do when conversations fail. She laughed. Light enough to be mistaken for friendly. Please tell me you're not tallying brunches. I'm tallying transfers. Invoice. And anything you said you'd square later. I said. Do you want to go first or should I? You're not seriously keeping score. A beat. That's petty. I'm done being generous and undocumented. I said. There's a difference. She inhaled. Then shifted into the family's oldest argument. You make more. And you spend mine. I said quietly. That arrangement is over. When we hung up, I put my phone face down, sat on the floor with Ellie, and helped Clover obtain a laminated home base badge from an index card and packing tape. Ellie wore the lanyard herself for a few minutes, then hung it on the doorknob like a seal. Before bed, I opened the spreadsheet one more time and added a line I had avoided because it felt like naming a failure. March 15, therapy intake after airport incident, $160 invoice. I'm not ashamed of needing help. I'm ashamed I waited for a catastrophe to justify it to myself. The next morning, Paige slid a business card across my desk at work like a magician, revealing a final trick. If you want it, she said. Make an appointment. He talks like a manual. Which is exactly what you need. The card read, Henry Bishop Counsel. On the back, in Paige's handwriting, keep it factual. 4 words. Underlined. I didn't call yet. I went home and cleaned the kitchen because scrubbing is my way of rehearsing for hard things. Ellie sat at the table, drawing a rabbit with a briefcase. What's in there? I asked. Documents. She said. Like it was obvious. Clover writes things down. That night, my parents FaceTimed from their hotel. The glow behind them was pool blue. The bracelets on their wrists said, first class even now. Even off the plane. Honey. Mom began. We don't want this to fester. We're willing to talk when you're calm. I'm calm. I said. Then stop with the dramatics. She replied gently. A sentence that contains its own contradiction. Here's what will happen. I said. And felt the words arrange themselves like cutlery placed just so. I'm going to send you a statement of what I've advanced over the last years. With dates and proof. You will repay it. Or we will put it in writing how you will. And we will discuss the airport with a third party present. In writing as well. No more calls that become something else. Paper only. Dad raised his eyebrows like we were playing. On invoice. A statement. I said. Then an invoice, if necessary. Mom's smile thinned. You wouldn't do that. You've mistaken my kindness for inability. I said. I'm capable. I'm done. She looked at me the way a person looks at a door that used to open without a key. Don't be like this. This is me, being like me. I said. And ended the call. I slept hard for the first time in days. In the morning, I packed Ellie's lunch with an extra apple because she likes to donate one to a friend just in case. On the fridge, I taped a fresh index card that read primary contact me in block letters. As if our house needed to memorize it too. After drop-off, I sat in my car staring at Henry Bishop's card until the numbers settled into a sequence I could dial. I didn't press call. Not yet. I wanted to finish my accounting first. To walk into any room with a spine of facts. I opened the laptop in the parked car. Sunlight, turning the screen into a mirror. And tallied the last 6 items I'd been avoiding because they were small and therefore easy to excuse. The total rounded itself with the quiet certainty of math. When I finally went inside, I printed the spreadsheet and slid it into a folder labeled Statement of Account. Ellie's drawing of Clover with a briefcase lay beside the printer. I tucked it into the pocket of the folder without thinking. Evidence comes in all forms. That afternoon, Mom sent a final text before silence. Please don't humiliate us. I typed back, I won't. I will document us. Then I put my phone on Do Not Disturb and took Ellie to the park. She climbed the big slide. Stood at the top. Looked down at me for permission. and then didn't wait. She slid. Hair flying. Clover held high like a flag. Part 2 ends where momentum turns into plan, the ledger complete. The language chosen. The posture set. The next step will have a subject line and a deadline. And when the family that once voted without me meets the math I've written, there will be no mistaking what happens next. I didn't call Henry Bishop until the spreadsheet stopped arguing with me. When the total settled at $58. Tsibai. Round as a gavel. I saved 3 versions XLSX. CSV. PDF, because redundancy is a form of courage. Then I dialed. Henry Bishop. He answered. Voice like a level line on a blueprint. My name is Olivia Hart. I said. I need help recovering money I advanced to my parents and sister over several years. I have receipts for almost everything. And last week, they left my 8-year-old daughter at an airport in the custody of a third party without my consent. How much? He asked. And how good is your paper? 58,700. Screenshots. Invoice. Bank transfers. I color-coded the asks and the thanks. A Briefpause. The sound of a pen uncapped. Tu para lanes. He said. Lane 1 civil demand for repayment, a factual letter with exhibits. Deadline. And notice of next steps. Lane 2 potential reporting regarding the airport incident, separate track. Different standard. You decide how loud to be. My advice: start with Lane 1. Keep it factual. No adjectives you wouldn't read to a judge. 10 business days is a reasonable deadline. Keep it factual. I repeated. Writing the words on a sticky note, like a spell. And if they push back, let the documentation carry the argument. He said. People who benefited from your silence will try to make this about tone. Don't give them tone. Give them math. We agreed on a flat fee for review and edits. He told me to draft and send by end of day. He'd turn it around the same evening. One more thing. He said. No back and forth by phone or text. Paper only. If they call, you can hang up. If they post, we preserve and respond formally. After we hung up, I opened a new document and placed the cursor like a fulcrum. Subject line first. Formal demand for repayment of funds advanced, 2019, 2025. Header with my address. Recipients by full legal names. Linda Hart. George Hart. Harper Cole. Nathan Cole. C.C. Henry Bishop. Counsel. Then the body. Built like a spine. Dear Linda. George. Harper. And Nathan. I am writing to request repayment of funds I advanced to you between March 2019 and March 2025 at your requests and with express or implied promises of repayment. The attached statement of account Exhibit A lists each item by date, description, amount, and proof. The current total due is $58. 700. Please remit payment in full within 10 business days of this email, no later than, exact date, day 10, by bank transfer or cashier's check to the account divided by address below. If I do not receive payment or a signed written repayment plan by that date, I will file a civil action to recover the balance, costs, and applicable interest. I also reserve all rights to pursue remedies related to the incident at the airport on airport date, when my minor child was left in third-party care without my consent. This is a statement of account. Sincerely, Olivia Hart. I attached Exhibit A, the spreadsheet. Exhibit B, receipts bundle. 15 pages. And Exhibit C, screenshots, red boxes around requests. Blue around acknowledgements. I added a one-page airport timeline: who authorized what, which desk, when I retrieved Ellie. No adjectives. Just timestamps. Before clicking send, I forwarded the draft to Henry. His reply came back in 7 minutes. Track changes like, discrete stitches, tighten a date. Swap please for kindly. Add notarized to the line about a plan. One added sentence near the end. Nothing in this letter waives my right to report child endangerment or neglect to the appropriate authorities. A line that said, without drama, I am willing to be loud if you force me. Looks good. He wrote. Send by email now. Certified mail copies tomorrow. I took a breath. I could feel in my shoelaces and pressed. Send. The email whooshed out with an ordinary sound that contrasted wildly with the size of the choice. Then I opened the printer tray, slid in crisp paper, and prepared the certified letters with green receipt cards. Ellie would later call proof post-its. They didn't respond that hour. Or the next. At 4:52 p.m. My phone flashed FaceTime Mom. I turned the camera so it pointed at the wall and answered. Sunlight and water filled my screen. My parents sat by a pool. Harper lounged behind them with a pink drink. Nate was a blur in turquoise. The boys shouted off camera. First-class wristbands still hugged their wrists like the past tense didn't apply to them. What is this supposed to be, Mom asked. Voice sugared and sharp. A statement of account. I said. A bill. Harper laughed. Brittle. You're joking. I'm precise. You can't charge your own family. Mom snapped. The sugar gone. You can't leave a child at an airport. I said. 10 business days. Dad leaned in with a grin he uses when he thinks we're play fighting. Come on. Liv. We take care of our own. I am taking care of my own. I said. Ellie is in our living room because I went to get her. Harper tried to varnish the scene. We made a group decision. You're punishing us because you're embarrassed. Your kid had a moment. She's 8. I said evenly. And even if she had a moment, that's not a reason to outsource custody to strangers. Without my consent. This conversation is over. Paper only. Or what Mom asked. Or I file. And I report. I said. And I prefer venues that like evidence. I hung up. My hands shook for 30 seconds. Then they didn't. The next morning, Henry emailed a short letter on his letterhead, addressed to each of them, acknowledging representation and instructing that correspondence go through him. He copied me. A fence. Quietly built. By noon. Harper posted on Facebook a pool photo. Captioned. Money changes people. Mom commented beneath, proud of you for staying graceful through pain. Cousins tapped hearts. A coworker from Harper's studio added family business shouldn't be public irony bleeding through the screen. I sent the links to Henry. 20 minutes later, he forwarded a 2-paragraph cease and desist, identify. Retract. Delete. Continued publication would result in claims. Screenshots preserved. We sent it. 90 minutes later. The post vanished. 2 hours after that, I received a text from Mom. You're making enemies. I archived it. You only make enemies of people who think your boundaries reduce their access. Day 3. There was a knock at my door. I opened it to Mom in sunglasses, and a cardigan I recognize from every church fundraiser. Harper behind her. Arms folded. Nate hovering. Dentist office polite. Sweetheart. Mom began. Stepping forward. Like absolution. Don't do this. You left my daughter. I said. Filling the doorway. This conversation happens on paper. You're just angry. Harper said. You'll regret this. Maybe. I said. But at least I'll regret it in my own house. I closed the door. The latch clicked like a period. Days 4 through 7 were quiet in the way a forest is quiet when animals are off trail. A cousin texted. What's going on? I replied with one sentence I advanced a lot over the years and asked to be repaid. No adjectives. Most people add their own. On day 8. Dad called about a porch step he could fix. I let him come. He tightened screws while avoiding eye contact. I didn't see it. He said to the floorboards. You looked away. I said. There's a difference. He nodded. Then pulled a plain envelope from his pocket. Cash. For the dent. And the ticket. And the bus passes. He said. Not the exact number. Just. Named. I left it on the hall table to show I'd heard him. Not because it made us even. On day 9. An anonymous email hit my work inbox accusing me of misusing corporate funds. Finance audited in a morning. My records were clean. My boss rolled his chair back and said, "You have someone's attention." I said, "Not for long." Day 10. The deadline passed with silence that felt performative. I logged the non-response and sent Henry a one-line update. No reply. Proceed per letter. He replied. Acknowledged. Drafting complaint. 15 minutes later. A new email came in from Mom's address with all 4 of their names in the signature line. "We need more time. This is unreasonable." I forwarded it to Henry. He wrote back. "Offer a written plan. Signed and notarized. Today. Otherwise we file tomorrow." I repeated his sentence to them verbatim. At 6:41 p.m. Mom replied. "We're talking. You're tearing us apart." I didn't answer. At 11:03 p.m. Harper sent. "If we pay, will you drop the other thing?" The other thing, meaning the report. I typed. Defrauden. Paying debts doesn't erase choices around a child. Deleted it. Rote instead. Repayment is owed on its own terms. Day 11. Henry emailed me a draft complaint short. Stripped of story. Rich with exhibits and a cover note. Ready to file at 9 a.m. tomorrow. He added a separate memo outlining where and how to report the airport incident, if I chose. Seeing both documents in my inbox was like seeing 2 roads I could walk without raising my voice. At 8:07 a.m. on day 12. My phone buzzed while I was tying Ellie's laces. Subject: settlement accepted. The email was from Henry. They've signed the repayment agreement with an immediate initial transfer and monthly installments per schedule. Notarized. Enforcement clause included. First payment to land today. A separate attachment listed terms in tidy paragraphs, amounts. Dates. Default triggers. A requirement to route any asks through counsel. And a paragraph in which they acknowledged my sole authority over decisions related to Ellie's care and travel. The transfer arrived before noon. A line of numbers sliding into my account with no fanfare at all. I watched it clear, and felt something unclench that had lived between my lungs for years. I didn't celebrate on speaker. I made dinner. I told Ellie we'd bake banana bread after homework. I printed the signed agreement and placed it in a new folder labeled reimbursement. Executed. I slid the green certified mail receipts behind it like medals, no one else would understand. When Jason from accounting stopped by my desk at work and said, "You look taller," I smiled. "Posture," I said. "It's amazing what it does." That night, Ellie drew Clover in sunglasses with a tiny suitcase and handed me the picture. "Where's she going?" I asked. "Court," she said gravely. "To bring papers." I laughed. Sudden and full. "Then she needs a briefcase." Ellie added one with 3 serious strokes. "If you want to know why they said yes." Why day 12 ended in signatures instead of a courtroom? Here's my guess. Dressed as a fact. Money prefers quiet. And so does reputation. The letter gave them a way to choose quiet. The memo about reporting gave them a reason to hurry. They thought the word family could outvote numbers. They were wrong. The math didn't shout. It didn't need to. It simply stood there, unbothered by tone, and waited to be paid. On the 12th afternoon, the same day Henry's subject line, "Settlement accepted," hit my inbox, my banking app pinged with a plain notification. Recurring transfer scheduled, family reimbursement monthly. No confetti. No calendar invite. Just a tidy line item with dates through year end and a note that said set up by sender. Real money. Has a quiet voice. You'd think signatures, and a first deposit would be the end. Paid is paid. But machines that run on you for years don't stop gently, they rattle and throw sparks while they look for a new fuel source. The first spark wasn't sent to me. Cousin Mariah screenshotted a thread, and forwarded it with a single eye emoji. "Mom, we'll get through this as a family." Harper, she's weaponizing money. Dad, everyone take a breath. Nate, let's discuss expense. Mom, not in writing. Please. Old choreography pivot to vague. Slide to shame. Then try to move the talk off paper. I set my phone face down and buttered Ellie's toast. She was drafting a packing list for Clover's professional travel kit. "Do rabbits need clipboards?" she asked. "A small one," I said. Very official. By noon, Harper called. Not the bright spin. The flat kind. We need to restructure the payment plan. She blurted without hello. The number Henry set, we can't do it. Not indeed. Or keep the studio. It's not Henry's number. I said. It's the math I already paid, divided by a schedule you signed. A small, ragged breath. I'll lose the studio. There was a time I would have thrown myself under that sentence like a mattress. Harper. I said. I've been your studio for years. Silence. Then the family's thesis statement. Small as a pin and just as sharp. You make more. And you've spent it. I replied. Even. If you want to renegotiate. Email Henry. Paper only. That afternoon. Mom's church friend called just to check on my heart. The script wore a sweater. Linda is so distraught. She's done so much for everyone. This has really shaken her. I'm sure. I said. Consequence is a poor bed. Apolita Pause. Then she rallied. We're praying. Thank you. I said. And meant it. Prayer can't fix a ledger. But it can keep people from banging on your door while you balance it. 2 days later. Dad showed up with a toolbox and a sack of groceries. He stood on the porch with his hat in his hands, like a farmer in a painting. Heard your step was loose. He said. Brought the yogurts Ellie likes. I let him in. He tightened screws and stared at the floorboards as if they could answer for him. I didn't see it. He said, finally. You looked away. I said. There's a difference. He nodded. Then he took a plain envelope from his pocket. First transfer's already in. He said. As if to reassure me, he wasn't buying forgiveness. This is. Just for the dent. The ticket. The bus passes. Not the exact number. Just. Named. I left the envelope on the hall table. If I take it. It's not because the slate is clean. I said. It's because you named it. He nodded again. A little undone. Can I keep fixing things? Fix your own. I said. Gentler than it reads. Then we'll see. News travels along the family grapevine like weather. Sometimes with lightning. Harper's landlord delivered a late notice at her studio. Mariah forwarded that too because apparently our people treat privacy like a suggestion. Harper posted a black screen story. Sometimes, the ones who say they love you become your obstacle. Comments bloomed. Underneath the chorus. One quiet message reached me from a past buyer of Harper's work. I didn't realize how much you'd been carrying. I'm sorry. The algorithm can't monetize that kind of note. It still counts. At Henry's insistence. I kept everything boring. No subtweets. No relative by relative explainers. For the few elders who asked kindly. I used one sentence. I advanced a lot over the years, and asked to be repaid. Most listeners will add their own adjectives. You don't have to. A small, mean attempt slid under my office door, an anonymous email to my boss claiming I'd misused corporate funds. Finance audited in a morning. My records were clean. Someone's energetic. Me boss said dryly. Not for long. I said. And sent Henry the screenshot for the file. Then came the dinner ambush. Mom texted. Come over. We made your favorite. Let's talk like family. My favorite is lasagna. I brought a pie Ellie and I had baked. Because a stubborn corner of me still hopes for clean conversations. I walked in to find 2 extra chairs at the table. Pastor Jim and his wife smiling. The smile of people told they're here to help mend a small misunderstanding. Absolutely not. I said from the doorway. Not loud. Final. I didn't consent to a committee. Sweetheart. Mom soothed. Hostess voice engaged. We're all here, because we love you. We're all here because you didn't respect my no. I said. I turned to the pastor. This is a legal matter with a signed agreement. There's nothing to mediate. He stood. Decent enough to read the room. Sounds like you've got it handled. He said. And steered his wife out, past Mom's tight smile. After the door clicked, Mom hissed. You embarrassed me. You invited witnesses to my boundary. I said. You embarrassed yourself. She blinked hard. Eyes bright. You've always been so transactional. You taught me the ledger. I said quietly. I just stopped keeping it in my head. We ate in a clatter of silverware. Harper didn't show. Nate texted Mom a photo of boxes stacked in their hallway. Moving staging caption. We'll figure it out. Mom held the screen up like proof of something I couldn't endorse. On the way home, Ellie asked from the back seat. Are we still on the no-fly list? I checked the mirror. She was serious. We are. I said. She considered. Then nodded. Then we'll make our own flight. She decided. And fell asleep across Clover like a parachute. By the end of the first month, the rhythm found us. Payment posted. Henry forwarded their proof. I dropped each receipt into a folder called Reimbursement Autopay, and added the confirmation number to a simple spreadsheet labeled Arrived. The predictability felt like a new kind of oxygen. Boring is dignity. With the oxygen came space. I noticed small changes in our neighborhood orbit. The neighbor who used to knock last minute. Can you sign for a package at noon? Started leaving notes 2 days ahead. A cousin who assumed I'd lead the reunion sent a group email asking for volunteers. Evanelli, who didn't mean to learn that Mom can tilt a room, started checking with herself first. Do I want to? She'd ask out loud. Sometimes the answer was yes. Sometimes no. Always. It was hers. Dad kept showing up with manageable fixes, replaced a flickering bulb with a motion sensor that doesn't panic in wind. Tightened the faucet that wept. He never brought up money unless it was to say. I budgeted for that. In the middle of swapping out a light. He said. Not looking at me. When you were little, you lined up crayons by shade before you drew anything. You do that now. With everything. He held up the burnt-out bulb like a small moon. I should have let you line things up for yourself. It wasn't an apology exactly. It was a door. I didn't walk through. But I didn't shut it either. A letter arrived from the airline's family services, careful words acknowledging a reported incident involving an unaccompanied minor and reminding all parties of best practices. No teeth. Just a file for my file. I slid it behind the airport timeline and felt a notch click. The world had at least looked at the page. The monthly transfer built a ritual I didn't expect. On déposite day. Ellie and I baked something small, banana bread. Blueberry muffins. When my phone pinged. We'd set aside one piece and label it future. Ellie adored the label maker. She'd peel the backing with surgical focus and press the strip on with both palms. For Clover's graduate school. She announced once. Solemn. Double major carrots and not being left. If all this sounds tidy. It wasn't. Some nights I argued with ghosts on the ceiling. Some mornings I had to resist the muscle memory of solving problems that didn't belong to me. There were drafts of texts I deleted unsent that would have felt amazing for 6 seconds and cost me days. There were photos that still punched my mother's hands on a grandchild's shoulders. Harper's grin with paint on her cheek. Dad's profile against a lake at dusk. Love didn't vanish. It just lost its alibi. Then unexpected, quiet. Harper texted, I got a front desk job at a dental office. Steady check. We'll keep paying. I'll send proof to Henry so you don't have to ask. A beat. Then Ellie can come to the boys' game if she wants. No votes. Just cheering. I typed. Ask her directly. 3 dots. Then, okay. I will. Mom orbited. Holiday invites arrived with clear times and no surprise stays. When she tested the boundary, can I take Ellie to the craft fair? Just us, I said. Not yet. She exhaled dramatically. Then surprised me with. Okay. A week later, she texted a photo of a knitted rabbit hat in Clover's size. Practice for when I get a yes. It shouldn't have gotten me. It did. Toward month's end. A small, deliberate test appeared in my mailbox. An unmarked envelope with Ellie's school schedule printed inside and a sticky note. Kids need grandparents. I scanned it to the incidents folder. Forwarded to Henry. And dropped the hard copy in a shred bin. If you've been someone's resource long enough, They will mistake your boundary for an attack. The shredder made a clean, important sound. At work. Pei asked over coffee. How does it feel? Like I stood up. I said. And now my bones remember how. Any regrets? She asked. Plenty. I said. Just not about this. On a Tuesday. After the second deposit landed. My phone rang at 3 p.m. Mom. Once. Twice. A text. Thinking of you. Then another ring. I said do not disturb and slid the phone across the room. Withdrawal is noisy. I slept. The next Saturday. Harper sent Ellie a simple message, Theo's game at 10. Want to come, we'll sit midfield. Quick exit, if you want it. She'd learned the language. Ellie looked at me. Then at Clover. Then back at the text. Yes. She typed. We will be observers. She packed a tote granola bar. Tiny notebook. Pencil sharpened within an inch of its life. In case I need to write something down. She said. I understood. Part 4 ends on the edge of that field. Before the whistle. Where our old orbit and our new one draw close enough to test the pull. The money is arriving. The paper is signed. The boundary holds. The next scene will not be about math. It will be about behavior. About who can stand on grass under a cold sky and act like they understand what home base means when a child says it. The field smelled like wet grass and concession stand onions. Parents unfolded chairs like small miracles. Ellie and I stood at the rail. Observers. Our exit line chosen in advance. Clover wrote in the tote with a notebook and a pencil sharpened to courtroom standards in case I need to write something down. Ellie had said. The sky was the kind of clear that makes you think time could be negotiated. Harper spotted us first. She lifted a hand, no theatrics. Just a hand. Nate nodded from the sideline. The boys. Mason and Theo. Windmilled with the frantic hope of being seen. My parents arrived late. Mom wore school colors in a scarf too dramatic for the temperature. Dad carried a mesh bag of orange slices like an offering. The whistle blew. Children collided with the seriousness of people who have not yet learned how many rules are optional. Ellie leaned into me. Warm and precise. At halftime. While the coach circled the team. Mom angled toward us with a smile designed for diplomacy. Sweetheart. She said. Let's grab ice cream. 3 of us. There's a place across the street. Ellie's fingers tightened in mine. We're staying. I said. We don't leave without me. Of course. Mom replied. Smile brighter. Later then. Plan slid under her words like cards under a door. Harper approached with 2 paper cups of coffee and stopped a measured yard away as if the air between us might be electrified. I sent proof to Henry. She said. Payment and my schedule. Thank you for coming. The coffee was exactly how I take it, 1 sugar. No cream. I didn't say how that detail knocked something loose in my chest. Thank you for inviting us. I answered. The second half turned ragged and thrilling. Theo scored on a toe poke that surprised everyone. Including Theo. Ellie forgot herself and shouted. Go with a voice that startled even the snack bar volunteers. Mom clapped. Dad whistled that too. Finger whistle that can puncture weather. For a slice of a minute. We were the picture people post when they want to sell you on the idea of family. After the handshake line. The worlds drifted toward each other like magnets testing pull. Mom hovered near Ellie. Touching her shoulder. In the proprietary way that makes my skin go static. Ellie stepped neatly behind me. We're going to the car. She announced. Executive. We'll meet you. I told them. Harper opened her mouth. Then shut it. Okay. The parking lot sloped. The kind of subtle angle that makes everything feel like a decision. I opened the trunk to stow our chairs. The space smelled like fabric cleaner and last week's groceries. As I slid the chairs in. Mom's hand landed on the trunk edge. Nails tapping a quick. Irritated rhythm. We can't live like this. She said. No, preface. All these rules. All this ledger talk. It's tearing us apart. We lived for years with rules I didn't write. I said. straightening. They were just unwritten. Dad stood off to the side. Hands tucked into jacket pockets like he'd learned something about not reaching. Harper lingered behind him. Her hands in her coat like she'd been told where to put them. Mom's voice sharpened. You're punishing me. I'm protecting my kid. I said. And myself. You think I'm a bad grandmother. Her eyes wet and bright. The old tactic that used to scramble me. I think you made an unforgivable decision. I said. And now we need forgivable behavior. What do you want? She snapped. A confession a parade blood. A written apology to Ellie. I said. On paper. Not on a phone. It must include the words we voted that she should stay. It must say you won't do that again. No unsupervised time. No posting about her or me without explicit permission. No financial asks through me route needs through Henry, so he can say no for me. If you can do those things, we can stand on the same grass. Mom stared like I'd spoken a language she refused to learn. You've become so transactional. Transparent. I said. There's a difference. I closed my hand around the edge of the trunk. A yellow smear on my sleeve caught my eye mustard from the halftime hot dogs. I hadn't noticed until now. I looked at the stain. Small and loud. You see this? Pretending it isn't, there doesn't make my sleeve clean. Naming it lets me wash it. Harper cleared her throat. I can do that. She said quietly. The apology. The no posting. The asks through Henry. All of it. Mom shot her a look that could boil water. Don't capitulate. Harper kept her eyes on me. This isn't capitulating. This is behaving like an adult. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded sheet. Her hand shook. I wrote something for Ellie. Can I read it? Ellie stood in her small, sturdy way. Yes. She said. But if I don't like it, I'll say so. Harper crouched to Ellie's height and read. Voice small in the wide air. Dear Ellie. I made a choice that hurt you. I believed catching a flight mattered more than your feelings. That was wrong. You were scared. And I didn't protect you. I am sorry. I won't do that again. If there is a hard moment, I will choose the option where you stay with your mom unless she says otherwise. I will not post about you without permission. I will not ask your mom for money. I will ask for forgiveness and then behave like I want to keep it. Love. Aunt Harper. Ellie considered. Then asked. Can I draw on the bottom? Harper handed her the pencil. Ellie added a tiny rabbit with a suitcase and a hat. Stamp of approval. She announced. But probation. Harper nodded. Eyes shiny. Fair. Mom made a sound that was mostly air. You're making a spectacle. She said to me. Add a trunk. Trunks hold things. I answered. I'm done carrying mine in the open. Dad finally spoke. Voice steady, like a beam you've checked twice. Linda. He said. We can sign what she wants and behave better. You would reduce us to documents. Mom demanded. We did that when we reduced her to a ledger. He said. The sentence surprised all of us. Including him. He looked at me and added. I can't unsign the past. I can sign now. Mom straightened her scarf like it could hold her position for her. She turned to me. You will always be difficult. Then she walked away. Not dramatic. Just gone heels, ticking on asphalt, like punctuation. We stood with the trunk open like a mouth. Harper folded Ellie's drawing into the letter with a care. I recognized my care. Borrowed and finally owned. I'll have it notarized and send it to Henry. She said. And I'll send the monthly proof without being asked. I nodded. Thank you. On the drive home, Ellie stared out the window. We rigged Clover into the seatbelt with a scarf. A safety procedure she insisted on. Mom. She said at a red light. What does probation mean? It means you're giving someone a chance to keep a promise. I said. And you're going to watch. I'm good at watching. She said. And went back to studying the world. Life didn't transform overnight. Gravity just shifted. 2 weeks later, A typed apology from Mom arrived. It was careful and short and left out the vote. I sent it back with a note, add the vote. Names included. A revised version returned the next day. The sentence added like a stitch. You can see if you look close. I filed it under. Apologies executed. Boundaries aren't punishments, they're instructions for how to stay. By spring. The payments were boring. Which is how I knew the story was healing. Boring is dignity. Harper texted proof to Henry on the 1st of each month, with subject lines like, posted on time, and attached confirmation numbers. After 3 months at the dental office, she moved her studio into a shared space with 2 other artists' cheaper rent. People to answer to. Her paintings got tighter. Less sprawling. More honest. She brought Ellie a small canvas of Clover as a superhero. Cape flying. Suitcase, trailing stars. Ellie hung it above her desk and saluted it every morning before school. Dad replaced my porch light with a motion sensor that doesn't panic in wind. He stopped bringing envelopes. He started bringing tools and time. While fixing a cabinet hinge. He said, without looking at me. When you were little, you lined up crayons before you drew. I should have let you line things up for yourself. I kept handing you other people's drawings. He smiled in the side of the mouth, way that keeps a man from crying. I'm late. I'm here. As for Mom, she orbited. Invitations came with clear start and end times. When she tested the gate, can I take Ellie to the craft fair? Just us, I said. Not yet. She exhaled dramatically. Then, okay. A week later, she texted a photo of a knitted rabbit hat the size of Clover's head. Practicing for when I get a yes. She wrote. It shouldn't have gotten me. It did. On the last day of school, Ellie and I took our own trip. Not Florida. A rocky coast 3 hours away where the water is so cold it edits your thoughts. And the inn smells like orange, marmalade, and coffee. On the second morning, Ellie asked the desk clerk for stamp stickers for Clover's passport. The woman didn't blink. Every traveler deserves a record, she said. And slid over a sheet of globes. Ellie chose 2 and stuck them in. Solemn as a judge. We ate sandwiches on the steps at dusk. The deli had gone heavy on mustard. It dripped onto my hand in a bright, stubborn streak. Ellie handed me a napkin. You'll remember because of that, she said. She was right. I will. I wiped it off and left the faintest yellow echo evidence that a stain can be addressed without pretending it never happened. Back home. The month's transfer landed with its quiet ping. We kept our ritual, set aside 1 slice of whatever we'd baked and labeled it future. Ellie peeled the backing off the label and pressed it on with both palms. For Clover's graduate school, she decided. Double major carrots and not being left. The joke had grown a life. We kept it because it kept us. If this sounds tidy, it isn't. There are still nights I argue with the ceiling and mornings I resist fixing problems that don't have my name on them. Sometimes a photo in a feed punches harder than it should. Dad backlit by water. Mom with her hand on a child's shoulder. Harper with paint on her cheek. Love didn't vanish. It just lost its alibi. But the center is different. The ledger returned more than money. It returned a story I could stand in. Not the girl who keeps the lights on. The woman who decides when they're on, and who gets to stand in the glow. Not the family vote that happens without me. The signed page that names choices and their costs. Not revenge, stability. Not spectacle, the quiet rhythm of a deposit arriving on time and a child who knows she doesn't have to audition to be chosen. A month after our trip, a letter from the airline arrived. More specific, this time an updated policy notice after review of internal procedures regarding minors. It mentioned primary caregiver, consent, and contact hierarchy. I don't kid myself that my complaint changed the world. But somewhere in a desk, there is a memo with a line that will make it harder to do what was done to us. I slid the letter behind the original airport timeline. Files can be a kind of prayer. On a Tuesday evening, Ellie set Clover on the table, put her hands on her hips, and announced, "We vote for pizza." I laughed. Votes are for preferences. Safety isn't up for a vote. She grinned. Then we safely choose pizza. We did. They thought leaving my daughter behind would teach me a lesson. It did. It taught me that love without boundaries is just hunger dressed like generosity. It taught me that the softest justice is punctual, a payment landing on time, an apology that uses the right words, a grandmother waiting for a supervised yes, instead of presuming one. It taught me that a trunk can be a courtroom and a mustard stain can be a closing argument. Mostly. It taught me that home isn't a place other people promise you. It's a vote you cast and sign. In ink thick enough to read, when the light is low. In a house where the primary contact is you. Story 2. My dad shamed me at my wedding. Until 200 seals stood to attention and saluted Admiral on deck. He told me I was a disgrace. I was standing behind the chapel doors, wearing my white Navy uniform. 4 silver stars on my shoulders. Gold buttons shining under the light. My phone buzzed. 5 words from a number I hadn't saved in years. You're wearing a uniform, disgraceful. I didn't need the name. It was my father, retired Colonel Frank Holstead. Former 82nd Airborne. A man who had fought wars, raised flags, and buried emotion. For a second I stared at the message. It didn't sting the way it used to. It just felt like confirmation. This was who he was. And this was who I had become. Then the chapel doors opened. 200 Navy SEALs rose to their feet. Someone shouted, "Admiral on deck." Every man and woman in the room stood at attention. Heels clicking. Eyes forward. The sound rolled through the hall like thunder. My father wasn't there. But my family was. Born into orders. I was born into a house where the flag mattered more than feelings. My father lived by rules, discipline, order, obedience. Love was assumed, never spoken. Shoes lined up at perfect angles. Meals served at 1,800 sharp. Silence during 60 minutes. If I scraped my knee, he tossed me a wipe and said, "Soldiers don't whine." He believed that serving the country was a man's duty. Daughters were meant to teach. Tonurse. To stay safe. When I was 10, he took me to an Army, Navy game and said, "You'll never wear those colors. Leave that to men." I didn't argue. I memorized every detail, instead the uniforms. The flags. The way power sounded when it didn't apologize. My mother was the opposite, soft voice. Gentle hands. A literature teacher who read Emily Dickinson at bedtime. She called me Stormbird. She said storms aren't to be feared, they're proof that you can move the air around you. When I told them I'd applied to the U.S. Naval Academy, she cried with pride. He didn't speak to me for a year. The silence was louder than anger. When I got accepted, he left a folder on my bed. Law school. Nursing programs. Teaching positions. Not one Navy SEAL on the page. Becoming the thing he feared. At Annapolis, I learned that being a woman in uniform meant proving yourself twice and being noticed half as much. I woke earlier. Studied longer. Endured harder drills than most. I didn't ask for fairness. I asked for a chance. I earned every bar. Every ribbon. But every time I called home, he didn't answer. Eventually, I stopped dialing. When my mother died during my 3rd year fast cancer. Cruel and silent. He didn't even tell me until it was almost over. Her last words to me were, "Keep flying." After the funeral, he sent an email. "The Navy seems to suit you. I still don't understand your decision." That was all. Each promotion widened the distance between us. But somewhere between the heartbreak and the medals, I stopped trying to earn his approval. I started building my own version of legacy. Sen. Proving ground. My first assignment was in Okinawa. Paperwork. Logistics. Nothing glamorous. Men twice my size called me ma'am with sarcasm. I learned to ignore tone and read eyes. I stayed quiet. Listened. Learned. When doors shut, I studied the hinges. Then came 2007. A recon mission off the Somali coast went bad. A supply team ambushed. 2 injured. 1 trapped. I wasn't required to go in, I was command. But I went. Bullets tore through steel like paper. 1 man's leg was mangled. I dragged him 40 yards under fire. Tied a tourniquet with 1 hand. Called medevac with the other. By the time the helicopter lifted, my uniform was soaked red. I refused the stretcher. They called me Iceback after that. Said I bled ice. Not blood. But I wasn't proud of the nickname. I was proud that the sailor lived. He still sends me a Christmas card every year. His daughter's name is Avery after me. That's when command began to notice. They said I had composure, clarity, leadership. They didn't see the recovery nights, the pain, or the invisible scars. But that's all right. Leaders aren't built in spotlights. They're built in silence. See. The rise. By 2015, I was running training at Coronado. I saw strong candidates fail for the wrong reasons. So I rewrote the rules quietly. We added mental resilience checkpoints, recovery systems, beer checks. Within a year, dropout rates dropped. Injuries halved. No medal came. But respect did. When I became Rear Admiral, the youngest woman to hold the post in my division, the unit gave me a standing ovation. My father stayed silent. An old army friend of his told me later, Frank says the Navy must be getting soft if they're promoting women like you. But he keeps your photo in his office. That hurt more than I expected. Love in silence still feels like absence. Woo. The man who stayed. His name was James. A civilian intelligence analyst cam. Logical. Kind. We met during a defense project. He challenged my process. I challenged his assumptions. He rewrote his entire presentation overnight and said, "You were right." That was the start. He never asked me to shrink to fit his world. He said, "The uniform is your truth. Why would I want you in anything else?" So when we planned our wedding, I told him I'd wear white, but mine would have 4 stars. We wanted a small ceremony in the Naval Chapel. Simple. Honest. The SEALs I'd led showed up anyway uninvited, insisting they couldn't let me walk alone. I didn't expect the crowd. I didn't expect the text either. "You're wearing a uniform to your wedding. Disgraceful." I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I just understood. That was the final attempt to shame me back into silence. But shame requires agreement. I no longer gave it. Lo. The walk. The doors opened. Heels sharp against wood. 200 SEALs rose in unison. Admiral on deck. The sound filled the air like a heartbeat. My throat tightened not from pain, but from pride. I walked between 2 of my oldest teammates, one who once pulled me from a burning helicopter, one who lost a leg but never his strength. I saw James waiting at the altar, hands behind his back, standing at ease, the way I preferred. Every seat was filled with people in dress, blues, soldiers, sailors, officers. When I reached the front, the room fell silent. Then the salute. 200 hands to brows. They weren't saluting a rank. They were saluting a life. James took my hands and whispered, "I don't need vows to know I'm already married to your courage." Our promises were simple: to protect each other's peace, to follow orders together, to build purpose on our own terms. When the chaplain said, "You may kiss the bride," the room didn't erupt, it breathed. Then came the applause. Deep. Real. Earned. We left under an arch of crossed sabers held by the enlisted, not officers. That meant more than any tradition. Because family isn't always who shares your blood. Sometimes it's who stands when you enter the room. See. The photo. 3 days into our honeymoon in Maine. My cousin sent a message, a photo of the chapel parking lot. In the corner, a man stood watching. Full dress uniform. Arms crossed. Colonel Frank Holstead. He never came inside. In the next photo, he was turning away. James looked at me. "He came," he said softly. "He just couldn't stand." And I realized when 200 SEALs had stood for me, my father had turned his back. Bah. Letters and forgiveness. Weeks later, the Pentagon invited me to speak about leadership and ethics. I told them courage wasn't loud, it was steady. That authority isn't about shouting, but about being calm when others panic. And that respect isn't inherited. It's earned. The next day, a letter arrived. No return address. But I knew the handwriting. I didn't enter the chapel because I didn't know how to sit among people who saw in you what I refused to. I didn't salute it. Not because you didn't earn it. But because I no longer knew how to honor what I didn't understand. I was wrong. If you'll let me. I'd like to talk. No uniform. No protocol, just a father trying to understand his daughter. Frank. I read it 3 times. Didn't cry. Didn't burn it. Just sat with it. James said. You don't owe him anything. No. I answered. But maybe I owe myself the choice. So. The meeting. We met at Arlington. At my mother's headstone. He wore civilian clothes. I wore my uniform not to prove anything. Just because it's who I am. He looked smaller than I remembered. You look like your mother when you stand like that. He said. We talked not about medals. But about regret. Silence. And how fear can disguise itself as strength. Before we left. He straightened his jacket and saluted imperfectly. Honestly. I returned the salute. Not because he'd earned forgiveness. But because he'd chosen truth. That night? I told James. He saluted. He didn't ask what it meant. He just held my hand. Sometimes, reconciliation doesn't need words. Just presence. Sure. Legacy. 6 months later. I was asked to lead a new program, a joint operations initiative to improve ethics and safety across branches. I called it the Salute Standard, not for what's worn. But for what's earned. We trained soldiers to see each other. Not just survive. We measured success in lives kept whole. Not just missions completed. Some old voices called it soft. I called it progress. The ones who mattered called it human. My father began writing again, short letters. Careful words. He told me about a kid on his street who saluted him every morning. He gets it wrong. He wrote. But he means it. He also told me he moved his medals down to a lower shelf. So that little boy could see them. He asked if I knew any admirals. He wrote. I said yes. Shi? A storm to learn from. Not long after. A storm threatened the Carolina coast. A ship was in trouble. Communication failing. I was at command when the call came in. I gave clear, blunt orders. Lean into the storm. Don't respect it. Steer through it. They did. The ship survived. Nobody died. When the comms chief exhaled, someone clapped. It wasn't for me. It was for survival. And that's the only applause that matters. That night, James asked what I was thinking. That ships respond better to blunt truth than fathers. I said. He laughed softly. Maybe fathers can learn too. Sure. The last salute. Years passed. The program grew. The rules changed. Fewer funerals. More letters from families saying thank you. At Sloane's funeral, one of my oldest comrades, Torres, handed me a coin with initials carved into it. S. M. He said it meant Sloane's secret message. I turned it over and said, see someone. Save many. He smiled. That's what I thought. When James and I renewed our vows on our 3rd anniversary, we chose the same chapel. Fewer guests. Quieter hearts. My father sat near the front. When we turned toward the aisle, a voice came from the back, steady. Respectful. Admiral on deck. It was him. This time. His hand rose in a salute. The room didn't stand. It didn't need to. I did. I saluted him back. It was imperfect. It was perfect. Shisen. What remains? Sometimes I look at my reflection, the white glint of the uniform. The stars on my shoulder. And I think about the text that started it all. Disgraceful. He didn't know another word for a woman who refused to bend. But now he does. Now. When I enter a room. People sometimes still say. Admiral on deck. And I answer. People on deck. Because that's who we are. Because respect isn't inherited, it's built. One salute at a time. And that is how I turned betrayal into strength. Silence into legacy. and a father's disappointment into a nation's salute. Story 3. 1. 0 years. I saved our farm from foreclosure. Paid off all the debts. Built successful operating systems. Then my father whispered, "You ruined our farm." I said, "Okay," and tore the transfer papers on stage. My name's Mason Hart. I'm 22. And at our town's harvest festival. My father leaned in close. Looked me dead in the eye. And said, I'd ruined our farm clear enough for the entire county to hear. The music stopped in a hiccup of silence. Mayor Ben Caldwell froze mid-handshake with a donor from the bank. Mrs. Whitaker from First Baptist halted with her pecan pie hovering halfway to the bake-off table. Even the 4-H kids paused. Calves shifting on rope halters and stamping at the dust like they could feel the tension ripple through the grass. Somewhere behind me, a child let go of a balloon and it drifted up. A ridiculous little dot of red escaping the tent ropes, while every grown-up pretended not to stare. I should have known the day would tilt like that. There'd been omens if I'd cared to read them the way the PA crackled when my name was announced. The way my dad's jaw set when the applause rolled over. The mustard smear drying on a paper plate balanced on a hay bale behind him. Like even the condiments had lost their patience. For as long as I remember. My father, Frank, has believed volume turns opinion into truth. He didn't shout this time. He didn't have to. He said it plain. Like a verdict. You've made it perfect. Son. Perfect enough to be wrong. People heard. People always hear when the person who once inspired half the town to plant tomatoes decides to pass judgment. Their faces tilted toward us in a slow, practiced way. Festival, casual, turned courthouse quiet. I felt heat creep under my collar. But my hands stayed still at my sides. 10 years. 10 years of keeping this place upright with my back and my brain. And somehow I was the problem. The county band picked up again. Tentative. A volunteer called for entries to the pie table. A little girl tugged her calf forward. Normal sounds. Forced back into the air, like nails, hammered into damp wood. My mother, Diane, studied the toes of her boots. My younger brother, Tyler, the golden child. The one who could slam a barn door and be praised for decisive leadership, folded his arms and smirked like he'd bought front row tickets to a show. It wasn't always like this in public. Growing up, the arguments lived in the kitchen. Behind the hum of the old fridge and the clink of cheap glasses. But the past 10 years shifted the center of gravity. When I rolled back from college with a diploma and choices, the farm had 90 days before foreclosure. The barn roof had collapsed in January, buckling under a wet snow that turned to ice and then to rot. Half the equipment wouldn't start even with ether and prayer. Dad's back injury meant he couldn't stand at the fence line without resting on the postbox. And Mom was taking double shifts at the diner just to keep the lights on. I was supposed to be in Seattle, starting at an agricultural consulting firm at $85,000 a year. Company car. Benefits. My apartment already lined up near the light rail. Instead, I came home. That first year, I slept in the office attached to the machine shed because the house made my chest hurt with the smell of damp carpet and apology. I worked 16-hour days. Learned which bolts would seize at dusk, and which valves would give, if I begged them. Sold my hatchback to make a $2,800 loan payment on May 14. I keep the receipt. Creased and soft now. Like proof that I once believed numbers could convince people. I ate whatever was left in the fridge, cold beans. A single bruised apple. The last cup of macaroni my mother had stashed for Tyler's late-night returns. When Dad moaned trying to sit, I tucked a pillow behind his back and listened to him say he'd get out there tomorrow. Tomorrow kept moving. You can't install that mess. Dad said the day I spread the plans for the new irrigation system across the kitchen table. Too complicated. It'll break. And we can't afford repairs. It'll cut our water costs by 40%. I told him, if we get another dry spell, it could save the fields. We've always done fine with the wheel lines. I signed the order anyway. The invoices stacked like dominoes on the desk. 3 summers later, when the drought came closer than a flame to paper, the fields didn't die. We ran the numbers. He nodded once and changed the subject. That greenhouse? Mom asked gently. Eyes flicking to my father. Is it necessary? Unnecessary. Dad muttered. A verdict. In one word. It'll pay for itself in a year. I said. Year-round produce. We can supply the restaurants. The winter market. He shook his head. I poured the foundation. Framed the ribs. And stretched plastic with 2 friends and a rented heater, while sleet rattled on the metal roof. The first December we ran it full. We cleared $15. Ling ling ling. I wrote the figure on the whiteboard in the office and left the marker on the lip like a dare. Organic certification is a waste of time. Dad said when I filed the first applications. Just a sticker for people who don't know better. It's 200 acres at triple the price. I said. We'll rotate. We'll rebuild the soil. He snorted. I walked fields with the inspector. Took soil samples at dawn. Sat in the truck at midnight, writing SOPs that would make auditors nod. When the first checks came in at those prices, I set one on the table with a note, this is what a sticker does. I learned to negotiate. I learned which store managers would take a chance on a handshake and which wanted a contract with initials on every page. I got us into 3 grocery chains. Brought in agritourism weekends that Dad said made us look like a theme park. We're farmers. Not entertainers. He grumbled. But the pumpkin patch and strawberry you pick days cleared $60. 000. Last year alone. Paid for the house's new roof. The plumbing that didn't knock like a ghost in winter. The heat that actually worked. We went from $340. 0 inches debt to paid off. My parents took their first vacation in 15 years, Hawaii. Because Mom kept a brochure in a drawer under the dish towels and never once let herself say the word out loud. I booked it. I paid for every part of it. When they sent a photo of themselves grinning on a beach, I looked at it alone in the office and felt something like relief loosen its grip on my chest. Still. Sunday dinners never changed. Dad found a way to aim his fork at what I'd done and call it too much. Too big. Not how Grandpa would have done it. Mom stirred gravy and stayed quiet. The way quiet can be a bruise. Tyler showed up twice a year with cologne too strong for a kitchen. And agreed with whoever sounded most like authority that evening. You're getting too big for your britches. Mace. Dad would say. This place had a soul before you put it on a schedule. The golden child nodded. Eyes on his phone. Inheriting approval by proximity. There were 3 moments that should have taught me this festival scene was inevitable. First June 3. 2 years back. 7:40 p.m. I asked Dad to sign a payroll adjustment so Maria and Jose, who were keeping us upright on weeks I was dead on my feet, could get the fair rate we had promised. We can't afford it, he said. Not after the tractor repair. I opened the ledger. Slid the pencil down the column. We can, I said, pointing at the margin plus $1. 320. Projected surplus for the month. Even after the repairs. He slapped the pencil away. I'm not running a charity. Mason. Neither am I. I said. I'm running a business that pays people what they earn. I signed the adjustment. He didn't speak to me for 4 days. 2nd September, 12 last year. 1015 a.m. County extension agent in a ball cap stood in our dying apple orchard. Fire blight, he said, touching a limb like it might bite. 18 trees gone past saving. I printed the recommendation to remove and burn. Dad glared at the paper. At me. At the agent. Your grandfather planted these, he said. They're history. They're a hazard. The agent answered. I ordered the chainsaws serviced. Tyler took a photo of the stumps later and posted something vague about before it all changed. Earning hearts and comments I had to swallow like nails. 3rd February 20 this year. 5:52 p.m. The building inspector patted the beam in the old equipment shed and stepped back as a sprinkle of rot crumbled like stale bread. You keep this up, he said. Someone's going to the ER. I scheduled demolition. Dad watched from the porch. Arms folded. You tear it down, he said. You tear down your grandfather. No, I said. I'm trying to make sure nobody gets crushed under him. Tula Sahil. Like I'd made a fuss. The next morning, he dropped by the cafe and told half the town I was erasing the past. Against that stew of memory and public rumor. I still came to the Harvest Festival, with hope heavy in my jacket pocket. I had the ownership papers folded twice. The black ink crisp against the white. My signature line blank. The plan was simple. After I was called up for the Farm of the Year ribbon, some committee's way of turning money into a rectangle of satin, I would hand the papers to my parents and tell them I wanted to sign the farm back over. The debt was gone. The systems ran. The managers could carry it day to day. I could finally, maybe, lift my face toward the life I'd put on hold at 22. It was supposed to be a gift and a goodbye. Not a fight. Then the announcer mispronounced our name, Heart Farm. Like it had an extra vowel, and Dad's hand clamped on my elbow. His grip was warm and solid. Familiar as rope and splinter. And then he said it. You've ruined it with your perfectionism. He added. Almost gently. Nobody recognizes Heart Farm anymore. I looked out at the crowd. At people wearing our logo on their t-shirts. The one a high school kid designed for extra credit. The one that made the old brand feel clean and proud again. Families lined up to buy our produce. Restaurant owners had come to shake my hand and say thank you for deliveries that showed up on time. Washed and labeled. I searched for Mom's face and found only the brim of her hat. Tyler's smirk widened. The silence stretched like a fence wire. I'd tightened too far. That's unfair, I said, keeping my voice level. When I came back, the bank had started the foreclosure paperwork. We were 90 days out. We would have figured it out. Dad snapped. But you had to swoop in with your fancy degree and change everything. You ripped out the old orchard for your precious greenhouse. You tore down the shed your grandfather built. The orchard had 18 trees with fire blight. I said. The county agent confirmed it. The shed was condemned. The inspector used the word hazard. He set his jaw. You always have an answer. Always so smart. But farming is about tradition. Not perfection. I heard my name over the PA again. Wavery and misplaced. Like the announcer was trying to move the afternoon along. My hands found my jacket pocket. Pepa ills mit mi fingers. In that breath, between what he said and what I knew I was going to do. A thing inside me unhooked. Not anger. Not yet. Just a clarity that tasted like cold water. I had spent a decade pulling this place out of the ditch. Brick by brick. Plan by plan. While the people I loved most treated every improvement like a personal insult. I had come here today, planning to give them everything back. Tied with a bow, only I would see. Somehow. Giving it back suddenly felt less like generosity and more like surrender. I should have known it would end at a table like this. In front of people who would carry the story home in their shirt pockets with the raffle tickets and the scent of kettle corn. I should have known that no amount of yield charts or water use graphs or bank statements stamped paid would move a man who believed tradition was a living thing that could be injured by change. I should have known, but I had still carried the papers. I slid them out. Crisp against the late afternoon light. And felt the whole crowd lean closer, as if the tent itself had taken a breath. I drove home from Seattle, with the job offer still unread in my inbox. The email header glowing on my phone like a small, kind sun. I kept flipping face down. The highway unwound across wheat stubble and dry hills. Past towns where the main street had more empty windows than lit ones. The closer I got, the more the radio dissolved into static. Until all I could hear was the engine, and my own math. 90 days until foreclosure. Interest compounding. Acreage idle. Forecast dry. I pulled into our lane at dusk. The mailbox flag hung bent like a broken finger. The porch bulb had burned out and nobody had replaced it. Inside. The house smelled like damp and lemon cleaner. Mom's good mug, the one with the faded strawberry, sat on the counter with a crack climbing the handle like a lightning fork. She had left a note under the salt. At the diner till 10. There's stew in the fridge. Love you, Mom. Dad snored in his chair. A blanket across his knees. The TV murmuring a farm show rerun that promised yield miracles at 2 a.m. Volume. I clicked it off, and the room felt too big. For as long as I remember. Silence is louder on a farm than any tractor. I slept that night in the office by the machine shed. On the rattle-tin sofa that had eaten pocket change for 2 generations. At 4:45 a.m. When the birds started winging up from the willows. I made coffee in the cracked percolator and opened a notebook. At the top of the first page I wrote. Day 1. Then 3 columns. Immediate. 30 days. 90. Under immediate. I wrote, call bank, triage equipment, walk fields, inventory debts. Check water rights. Call county extension. Under 30 days. I wrote exterior roof bid. Irrigation design. Greenhouse cost model. Under 90. I left it blank. Because the bank had already chosen that number for me. By 7:10 a.m. I was at First County Bank. Sitting across from a man named Grant, who wore a tie with little tractors on it, as if the novelty could soften the words he had to say. Mason. We've been more than patient. He began. Your father's history with us is I know his history. I said. I need the exact numbers. He slid a folder across. Total arrears $42. 600. Accrued interest $3. 480. Penalties. If we proceed $6. 000. And the note on equipment, $18. 300 pas de deux. Options. Short of a sale. He cleared his throat. A detailed plan. Proof of revenue. Collateral. I have a degree and a job offer for $85. 000. He lifted an eyebrow. That's not collateral. It means I know what I'm giving up if you say no. I said. Give me 60 days. 90. He said out of habit. Then shook his head. 60. I signed my name with a pen that had the bank's logo on it and felt the kind of stupid courage that comes from making a promise to time. The first Monday. The tractor died halfway through mowing the west pasture and coughed blue smoke like a distress flare. I wrote the part numbers on my arm with a Sharpie and drove to a guy in Mill Junction who had a boneyard of machines older than me. Cash? He asked. Net 30. I said. And slid him a piece of paper with our projected purchases for the year. He grinned. Ambitious. He took the net 30 and added a worn cap to the bag. For luck. He said. I wore it till the bill was paid. Back home. Dad limped out. Pushing the screen door with the back of his hand. You can't run this place on a notebook. He said. We haven't been running it at all. I said. We've been coasting downhill and pretending it's driving. He stared past me at the fields like they might answer for me. You can't fix everything. No. I said. Just enough. Mom started leaving the diner a half hour early when she could. Stumbling through the door, with the smell of coffee and fryer oil stitched into her sweater. She would count tips at the table while I circled expense lines. We'll get the roof quoted. I told her. You don't have to keep doing double shifts. We need the roof because of the leak over your father's chair. She said. And smiled, tired. It wasn't a protest. It was a fact with a bruise in it. On May 14. I sold my car for $3. 200 and handed $2. 800 to the bank. To reset one of the smaller notes. The buyer. A college student with a skateboard wedged under his arm. Said. This is your only car. Not anymore. I said. And watched him drive away in the rear view of the truck I'd borrow for the next 6 months. The irrigation plan started as a sketch on butcher paper and turned into an installation schedule taped to the office wall. Each day marked with Sharpie squares. Dad stood in the doorway. Arms crossed. Too complicated. Valves. Sensors. The controller more to break. Less to waste. I said. We're losing water we don't have. We've survived worse. He said. Survived isn't the bar anymore. I said. Not if we want to be here in 10 years. He looked at me like I had spoken treason. Your grandfather would say, I know what he'd say. I answered. And I know what the meter says. When the last trench was backfilled and the controller blinked green. It felt like flipping a breaker in a dark house and finding every room still had a bulb. I learned the greenhouse by building it. The supplier called on September 8 to say the heater shipment was delayed. A cold snap hit on the 12th. And I spent that night with a borrowed space heater and a handheld thermometer. Checking the corners every hour. Writing temps on a clipboard that shook slightly because I hadn't slept in 30 hours. This is unnecessary. Dad said, when he found me at dawn. Jacket frosted at the shoulders. If it's unnecessary, we won't need the money it makes. I said. If we need the money, it won't be unnecessary. We cleared $15,000 that first December. Mom held the deposit slip like a postcard from someplace she thought didn't exist. Hiring Maria and Jose was the first real test of whether I meant what I wrote in the notebook. I'd seen them on a neighboring farm, outworking every clock on the place with a calm that made chaos look like an option. I offered them full-time with a path to management. When I brought the paperwork to Dad, he tapped the wage line. We can't afford this. We can't afford not to, I said, and slid over the ledger. Here. Increased efficiency. Reduced loss. Higher margins on quality. After the adjustment, plus $1. 320 projected monthly surplus. He pushed the ledger away. Jaw tight. I'm not running a charity. Neither am I. I said. I'm building a farm where people don't leave angry. He didn't talk to me from June 3 to June 7. On the 8th. He asked Maria where the extra wrench was. And called her ma'am. That was his apology. The orchard broke his heart. 18 trees blackened like burned rope. Branches curling into those shepherd's crooks. You don't come back from. The county agent said the words, remove and burn with no drama. Like he was telling us how to change a tire. Dad stood with his hands in his jacket. Rough thumbs worrying the fabric at the seam. Your grandfather planted these, he said. Grandpa also tore out the corn the year it failed. I said. He didn't stand in the field and hope it turned into wheat. Tyler wandered up in a clean flannel. Took a few pictures. And said. Maybe we don't have to do all of them. I pointed at the brown ooze on a cut limb. That's not how infection works. He nodded like I'd confirmed something rude. Later, he posted the stump photos with a caption about change. And people sent him messages about legacy and loss, while I swept sawdust out of my boots. The shed was easier because it was objective. The building inspector climbed the ladder. Knocked on a beam. And a puff of rot dusted his sleeve. If this falls, whoever's underneath won't get back up, he said. He wrote unsafe on a form and left. Dad watched me schedule the demolition and said. You tear it down. You tear down your grandfather. I'm tearing down a hazard. I said. Grandpa's still in the soil. Tyler told people at the cafe that I was erasing history. It turned out history could be anything someone loved as long as you didn't ask it to hold weight. Between those skirmishes, the work kept moving. I took soil samples in a grid at dawn, rotating through 20 fields until I could tell the difference in texture blindfolded. I wrote standard operating procedures at midnight by the glow of a desk lamp that heated my forearm more than the room. I learned which buyers would demand a discount, just to see if you'd flinch. And which would pay a premium for a perfectly packed pallet and a delivery on the dot. When the first organic certification came through for 200 acres, the inspector shook my hand and said, You've got systems. That's rare. I stood by the truck and let the word systems settle in my chest like a stone you keep because it feels like it belongs in your pocket. Sunday, dinners carried the same choreography. Mom plated roast chicken. Dad speared reasons he didn't like the way I had seasonally clocked the crew. Tyler scrolled and nodded at the parts that made him feel included. You're getting too big for your britches, Dad said one night, gesturing with a fork as if that made it safer. This place had a soul before you put it on a schedule. This place was drowning, I said. I gave it a boat. A boat with rules, he answered. As if rules were the insult. Rules keep people from getting hurt, I said. They also keep people from living, he said. And Tyler said. Exactly. Like an echo with gel in its hair. 2 weeks later. The bank called. Grant's voice had the cautious cheer bankers use when they think they're delivering good news. Your last payment cleared. Debt is settled. Equipment note too. All of it, he said. Congratulations, Mason. I stood in the office and stared at the stapled stack of paid receipts. The old percolator hissed. The cap from the Mill Junction boneyard hung on the chair back like it was listening. I didn't tell my parents right away. I wanted to show them with something bigger than a phone call. I thought the Harvest Festival. Let it be public. And not the kind of public we'd learn to survive. The weeks before the festival, people stopped me in the hardware store, in the feed aisle, outside church. The new produce display at Mitchell's Market looks great. Mrs. Whitaker said. I can tell your carrots from anyone's. The mayor's assistant emailed about the Farm of the Year recognition. Someone asked if we could bring a calf for the kids to pet. No petting stock during peak harvest. I wrote back. And then added. We'll bring pumpkins. On the morning of the festival, I ironed a clean shirt in the office because that was where the outlet worked. The jacket with the papers hung on the back of the chair. I signed my own name in the air once. Twice. Rehearsing steadiness. I told myself today is a hinge, it swings us into a room with more light. Before I left, I walked the fields. Maria waved from the squash rows. Jose called a joke about the mayor eating more free samples than anyone. I checked the irrigation controller one last time, green lights all across. On a fence post near the lane. A faded ribbon from a fair 10 years ago. Fluttered. Half torn, but still holding. I took it off. Folded it into my pocket next to the papers. And headed toward town with a certainty I had earned hour by hour. What I didn't count on was how certainty can make you deaf to warning. At the edge of the festival grounds, I saw Tyler laugh with a group of guys I recognized from the cafe. His hands, creating little half moons in the air as he spoke. They glanced at me. Then away. Dad stood by the pie tent with his shoulders squared. The posture he used when he had decided something, and would announce it like weather. Mom traced circles on a napkin with her thumb. The PA crackled. The band tuned. The mayor found his place on the program. I felt for the papers in my inside pocket, and touched the folded ribbon instead. Today, I told myself. Stepping under the white canvas of the big tent. We turn the page. Someone behind me said. Not unkindly. Or we find out who's been writing in the margins. The first contract I ever signed that scared me was with Northfield Grocers. Their buyer. A woman named Erin, with ink stains on her fingers, and a memory for prices down to the penny. Flipped through my sample packets under the fluorescent hum of a back office that smelled like cardboard. We'll start with greens. Root vegetables. And herbs. She said. Quality's there. But delivery windows are tight. And if you miss two, the system drops you. She pushed the sheet across the table. Volume tiers. Penalties. The kind of language that makes you do the math twice. I drove home with the draft on the passenger seat and the old radio, talking about a thunderstorm that never arrived. At the kitchen table, I laid out the pages next to the ledger. Mom refilled my coffee and said nothing. Dad read the first clause and snorted. Chains squeeze you till you squeak. We're not one of their California suppliers with a fleet. We have reliability. I said. And systems. If we hit our marks for one season, we'll replace the worst paying wholesale and be stable year-round. He tapped the penalties with a blunt finger. Miss 2 windows and get dropped. That's how they do it. String you along to fail. And say it's policy. Or they keep us because we don't miss. I said. 3 mornings a week. 6 a.m. Doc. We can do it. He leaned back. Chair creaking. We could always sell at the farmer's market like your grandfather. Farmer's market moves volume on sunny Saturdays. The chain moves it on rainy Tuesdays too. Erin's contract forced the farm to become a clock. I bought a used refrigerated box truck for $19. $400 too much. Too necessary, and spent 2 Saturdays in the gravel lot, teaching Jose to back it into spaces that looked a size too small. We reorganized harvest into A. M. P. M. blocks. Wrote out pack lists on laminated checkboards. Built a cold chain that didn't break because someone forgot a latch. The first month, we hit every window. When Erin called to expand the order to include tomatoes from the greenhouse, I stood in the field with my phone, dirt in my palm crease, and said the most satisfying word in farming: yes. 2 more chains followed by late spring. Mitchell's took our salad mix and carrots. Ridgeview Markets took herbs and premium tomatoes. We signed service-level agreements with delivery windows that, if you missed them, costa $250 per incident. That's a week of groceries. Dad said, reading the fine print. It's also the price of being the farm they trust. I said, trust is a line item. We're going to pay to earn it, or we're going to pay because we don't have it. By midsummer, the office whiteboard looked like air traffic control. Maria color-coded tasks because she said my all-caps handwriting made her eyes tired. Bins rolled from wash to pack to truck, without stopping for gossip. We learned to bag greens in 75-second sets. We taped pictures above the pack line. This is a perfect bunch. This is not so. Nobody argued definitions when they were tired. The first time a driver texted Doc 4 jammed. Use 5. And Jose rerouted without a sigh. I felt my shoulders lower an inch. The money didn't arrive like a waterfall. It arrived like a line of rain finally making it across a dry field. Payroll hit on Fridays. Fuel on Mondays. Insurance on the 1st. But the balance started to tilt. After the third on-time quarter. When I wired $28,000 to wipe out the last of the equipment. Note. I sent Grant at the bank a photo of the paid stamp lined up like a parade on our desk. He texted back. Never thought I'd see that desk look like a Ledger commercial. If it sounds like everything was humming, I should tell you about Sundays. Dad's voice had an undertow. That week's friction worked its way to the table and pretended to be about salt. You're spreading us too thin, he'd say. Spearing a potato. We used to fix things when they broke. Not invent things to break. I build so we don't break. I'd say. You build so you can say you built it. He'd answer. Tyler would nod and add. Exactly. As if he'd kept score, and I had lost. Mom would pass the rolls like a referee, who knows the players won't hear the whistle. 3 moments stand out from those middle years. Each one, a small fracture that looked harmless. Until you saw the crack had run through the whole beam. First was the community board meeting about signage. We'd put up a tasteful wooden sign at the lane our name burned into cedar. A clean arrow toward the farm stand. The board didn't like that I'd added a second sign before harvest season for the pumpkin patch. Commercialization. The chair said. We're not a theme park. It's one weekend. I said. We charge $5 to park, and that covers portable toilets and traffic cones. A man I'd sold hay to for 15 years said. Your grandfather didn't need signs. My grandfather had every neighbor knocking because we were the only farm for miles. I said. Now I compete with a corn maze and a brewery that serves cider slushies. If people can't find us, they can't buy from us. Dad spoke from the back like it was a revelation. He's making us into something we're not. I looked at him. Then at the board. I'm making us solvent. They voted to allow seasonal signage with size restrictions. Outside. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. You always have a way to make it sound like you're saving everyone. He said. I'm trying to save this place. I said. And the wind moved the cedars like a slow shake of the head. Second, was the CSA launch weekly boxes prepaid for the season. I ran the numbers conservative and printed 200 slots at $660 each. Which would fund early labor and seed when the bank account looked like a winter field. We sold out in 9 days. At orientation, I told our new members to bring back their boxes and to text if they found a bad radish. We'd make it right. You don't have to guarantee a radish. Dad said when I got home. People take what they get. They trust us. I said. That's the product. He shook his head. The product is the vegetables. The product is the feeling they get when they open the box and know we're on it. I said. He muttered. That's not farming. And Tyler posted a photo of a CSA box with a caption about how things used to be simpler. The photo got 300 hearts. The next morning, a member emailed. Worried the farm was changing too fast. I found myself replying at 5:30 a.m. with a paragraph about soil, organic matter, and community that read like a confession. Third was the night before the first farm-to-table dinner in the barn. We'd scrubbed the floorboards. Stromwarmlights. Rented long tables and set white plates on butcher paper runners. The chef from town brought chive oil in a squeeze bottle and a crate of incense cedar to tuck into bouquets. The tickets $120 a seat had felt arrogant when I built the event page. And then they sold out in 4 hours. People are paying for this, Dad said, circling the room like a skeptic at a magic show. They're paying for a story that happens to be true, I said. He pointed at the place where Grandpa's pegboard had hung. Where do you hang the sockets set at the end of the night? That pegboard had meaning. I swallowed. I saved the pegboard, I said. It's in the shop. I cleaned it. It was soft with grease. It'll fall apart if we pretend it's still a wall. He looked at me like I'd pulled a trick. You always have an answer. I have reasons, I said. Same thing, he said. It isn't. I wanted to tell him. Answers stop a conversation. Reasons invite one. But I had learned he wasn't asking. By the time the farm had a staff meeting, every other Monday, and a maintenance calendar pinned to the shop door, Tyler had become an expert in legacy without ever breaking a sweat. He'd show up in a clean shirt and tell the crew stories about Grandpa teaching him to drive the old tractor. The crew would smile because nostalgia is polite. And then look at me for the plan. He started spending more time in town. Sipping coffee in the cafe, where opinions go to find oxygen. Telling anyone who'd listen that I was turning the farm into a brand. It's about heritage, he'd say. And the word would float. Full of meaning and empty of tasks. One afternoon, after I'd spent 3 hours fixing a small but catastrophic leak under the wash table that had turned the floor into a skating rink, I walked into the kitchen to find Dad and Tyler at the table, with a man I didn't know. This is Walt, Dad said. He's a builder. He thinks the old shed can be braced. I looked at Walt. The inspector wrote, unsafe. I scheduled demolition. Weltschogel. I can brace most things. How much, I asked. Cheaper than a new building, he said. Which wasn't an answer. I set the inspector's report on the table. If someone gets hurt because we braced rot, we're done. Dad's mouth pinched. You like tearing down what you didn't build. I like not burying someone, I said. Tyler stared at his phone. Then said, people will think you don't value the past. As if the past were a neighbor I'd refuse to tip my hat to. I tried. Once. To bring in a third party. A neighboring farmer. Pete. Who'd modernized early, and still kept his neighbor's respect. Came by for coffee. Frank, he said. Your boy's got a head for this. Your place is the tightest ship in the county. Dad pot coffee. Set the pot down harder than he meant to. My boy thinks metal and plastic can replace what a name stands for. Pete looked at me over his mug. A name stands for how you treat people and whether your bill's clear, he said. Everything else is paint. Dad smiled without his eyes. Paint peels. Then you paint again, Pete said. Or you let the rain in. We were solvent by late summer. Which is not the same as being safe. I started thinking about the transfer papers, the way you think about a gate you've been meaning to fix every time you pass. You add another reason to do it right now and another reason to wait until tomorrow. The manager team could run the day-to-day. The contracts had stabilized. The debts were gone. The plan was forming in my head long before I printed the forms, sign it back. Thank them for the years. Step toward a life that wasn't built on me. Catching, falling things. Tyler heard enough to piece together an idea. So you're quitting, he said one evening. Trying for nonchalance and landing on eager. I'm not quitting, I said. I'm setting it up so it doesn't depend on me. That sounds like quitting. It sounds like a succession plan, I said. He laughed once. Succession means Dad stays in charge. Succession means the farm survives, I said. Who's in charge? Depends on who shows up. He leaned back. People prefer the original recipe, he said. Like this was fried chicken. 2 days before the harvest festival. The local paper called to ask for a photo. We're running a piece on Farm of the Year. The reporter said, would you pose with your parents? Of course, I said without thinking. We stood in front of the greenhouse. The three of us. Mom wore her good cardigan. Dad wore the jacket Grandpa used to wear on Sundays. The reporter told us to stand closer. Dad angled slightly away from me. A small geometry you only notice if you've fought over angles before. On the drive back to the house, he said, "We'll say a few words at the festival." I asked. "I have things to say about what this farm is," he said. The road unspooled between fields. I knew row by row. "Okay," I said. Because I wanted it to be okay. That night, I took the transfer papers out of the desk and slid them into the inside pocket of my jacket. Behind the cufflinks I never wore, I stood a long time in the doorway of the office, listening to the box fan and the night insects vibrate the window screen. The whiteboard still said deliver doc 360 amperes. Even though it was the one day of the year we didn't deliver. I wrote one more line at the bottom: festival, 2 p.m. Announcement. The marker squeaked. I capped it and told myself I'd sleep. I didn't. I lay on the office sofa with the papers under my jacket like a secret I could feel through fabric. Around 3 a.m. A coyote barked in the ditch and the refrigerator kicked on, and I remembered every argument we'd had over the last 10 years. Stacked end to end like square bales. I tried to picture the moment on the stage, the mayor smiling. The ribbon. My parents' faces when I handed the papers over and said, "It's yours. Debt-free. Ready for the next chapter." In my head, I gave a short speech about stewardship and gratitude. In my head, Dad squeezed my shoulder. At 6 a.m., I went out to the field and walked a row of kale. Dew glazed the leaves. When I reached the end, I turned. Because that's what you do. When the line runs out, you turn and start another. By noon, the truck was loaded with produce for the festival stand. By 1, we were parking behind the big tent. Tyler was already there. Hands in motion. Telling a story to someone in a hat I recognized from the cafe. Dad stood near the pie table. Jaw set the way it gets when he's decided the past needs a defender. I checked the inside pocket of my jacket again. Felt the sharp edges of what I'd brought. And headed into the white tent where the ceiling feels like a sky someone lowered just for a day. The mayor's voice wobbled through the PA like he wasn't sure whether to introduce a ribbon or a eulogy. And now, Farm of the Year. Heart Farm. Polite applause washed up against the stage and slid back like a weak tide. I stepped forward. Dad stepped with me. We ended up shoulder to shoulder at the microphone. Which is a terrible place to discover two people are pulling in opposite directions. Mayor Caldwell cleared his throat. "Frank. Mason, few farms have transformed." Dad's hand landed on the mic. Steady as a fence post. "Transformed," he repeated. Like the word itself needed fixing. He smiled, the smile he uses for church pictures, and said, "We've always been a simple farm. We've never needed bells and whistles to feed our neighbors." He angled the mic toward his mouth. "Lately, some folks think if it isn't new, it isn't good." I felt my jaw move before my voice did. "We upgraded to survive," I said. Calm. Because calm was the only currency I had left. When I came home, we were 90 days from foreclosure. A ripple went through the crowd. People who knew. People who didn't. People who had heard a version designed to keep them comfortable. Mayor Caldwell tried to step between us with the ribbon. But Dad wasn't finished. "You can't measure everything with a spreadsheet," he said. "Tradition matters. Heritage matters. My father built this place with his hands." I took the second mic. The one they set out in case someone wanted to thank sponsors. "Your father also traded in the farmal when it wouldn't hold pressure," I said. He adapted. He did it quietly, because bragging didn't put hay in the loft. "Is that what this is?" Dad asked. "Bragging." I lifted my palm to the crowd. Not to hush them, but to include them. "Here's what we changed. We installed an irrigation system that cut water costs by 40%. We built a greenhouse that brings in $15,000 a month in winter. We certified 200 acres organic, and now sell at triple the conventional price. We added agritourism weekends that brought in $60,000 last year. We paid off $340. Null inch debt. We did that so we could keep farming here. Not to prove anything to anyone." A kid near the front tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, She nodded without taking her eyes off the stage. I found Grant from the bank standing under the tent edge. Arms folded. The look of a man who's seen too many farms go the other way. Erin from Northfield Grocers stood beside him. Her name badge still clipped to her jacket. Brows knit like she was calculating dock times. Even now. Dad didn't look at any of them. He looked past the crowd to the far hills where the old orchard used to be. And his voice softened in a way that hurt more than the earlier edge. He ripped out the apples my father planted. He said. He tore down the shed. He hung lights in a barn where we used to hang hams. I don't recognize Hart Farm anymore. Tyler. The golden child. Said just loud enough for the first rows to hear. Some of us still remember what this place was. And a few people murmured in a way that could be sympathy or smoke. I swallowed. The orchard had 18 trees with fire blight. I said. The county extension agent documented it on September 12. Remove and burn, that's the recommendation. The shed was labeled unsafe by the inspector on February 20 IT. Those decisions were about safety. Not style. The county agent ball cap. Clipboard as if by instinct raised a hand from the third row. That's right. He said. I wrote the report. Dad's mouth tightened. You always have an answer. He said to me. Ignoring the agent. Always a piece of paper. But farming isn't perfect rows and perfect records. It's knowing that this ground remembers the hands that shaped it. I took a breath and let it out slow. I know. I said. I remember every callus on those hands. I also remember the bank ledger with arrears written across the top. I remember Mom taking double shifts so the lights would stay on. I remember selling my car for $3. $200 so we could make a $2. $800 payment on May 14. I remember sleeping on the office sofa because the house smelled like wet carpet and apology. And I remember what happened when we changed, people kept their jobs. The roof stopped leaking. The heat worked. And Mom finally quit the diner. Mom stiffened like my words had bumped into her. Then stared down at her shoes as if they might explain the weather. The crowd's noise rose and fell. Somewhere, a generator coughed. Then recovered. Mrs. Whitaker. Pie. Queen. And unofficial conscience. Stepped closer. Frank. She called. Voice clear. We're proud of this farm. Some of us like both the old stories and the new produce. A low chuckle threaded through the tent. It didn't fix anything. But it lifted the corner of the moment. Dad took the mic back with a patience that was more dangerous than anger. It's not about pride. He said. It's about losing the thread. You don't turn a farm into a brand and expect the soul to stay. The soul is how you treat people. I said. Ask Maria and Jose if the farm lost its soul when they got manager titles and fair wages. I hissed. And Maria lifted a hand from beside the farm stand. Cheeks flushed. Not from embarrassment, but from the speed she and the crew were working. Wages are your favorite song. Dad replied. You pay people and think it buys you respect. I kept my tone even. We pay people because it's right, and also because it keeps good people here. That's not a song. That's a plan. Tyler leaned into his line like it had been rehearsed. A plan that leaves no room for the way things were. He tilted his chin to the crowd. He'd replace Sunday supper with a staff meeting if he could. A laugh rolled from the back, one of those laughs that wants to be a friend to whoever hears it. I made myself look at Tyler, and only Tyler. You show up twice a year and call it legacy. I said quietly. Legacy is a chore list. Not a caption. That stung him. The smirk twitched. Then hardened. The mayor tried again with the ribbon. Flüsterte. Let's celebrate the achievements. He said. Jobs created. Debt paid. A model for the county. Dad shook his head. You can count jobs in dollars. He said. You can't count the feeling you get when you walk into a barn and know your father would know where to hang his hat. We kept the pegboard. I said. It's in the shop. I cleaned it so the tools wouldn't fall. I kept his hat. I kept the stories. I threw away rot. Words. Dad said softly. You always have the best words. Something in me tilted at that, at the suggestion that language was a trick. For years, I'd avoided speaking this plainly in public because I was mindful of what pride does when it gets air. But I wasn't chasing applause now. I was trying to put the facts on the table without flinching. This farm is solvent, I said. We hit every delivery window with Northfield Grocers for 3 straight quarters. We deliver to Mitchell's and Ridgeview on time. We have a CSA that sold out 200 shares at $660 each. We provide produce to restaurants who rely on us. Those aren't decorations. That's the work. A voice from the crowd, young. Ernest, pipe it up. I got my first job here, said a kid in a crew t-shirt. They taught me how to harvest properly. It mattered. His face reddened. But he held his ground. I wish Dad would look at him. He didn't. He angled slightly toward the microphone as if adjusting where the sound hit the tent poles. We could have figured it out, he said to me, returning to the line that had become a prayer. We didn't need saving. You needed time, I said. And I bought it. With my 20s. With a job I didn't take. With years of 16-hour days. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The quiet held the words up. I did it because I love this place and the people in it. I did it because I thought, and maybe this was naive, that if I made it undeniable, we'd stop fighting the same fight. The breeze lifted the edge of the tent and bumped a string of lights against the metal pole with a soft chime. Out beyond the fold-up chairs, I could see our farm stand line curling past the kettle corn like a river deciding its own banks. Erin checked her watch and gave me a small, rueful shrug, as if to say, dock times aren't the only clocks. Dad's face did something complicated: grief, pride, anger. All trying to control the steering wheel. Nobody recognizes the place anymore. He said finally. You made it perfect. Perfect is stiff. It breaks. We used to be flexible. We bent with storms. We bent until we were horizontal, I said. And a couple of old-timers snorted. Not unkindly. Perfect isn't what I built. Resilient is what I built. Systems are how you bend and don't snap. That's the whole point. We stood there. 2 versions of loyalty clicking against each other like gears that don't mesh. The mayor's smile had gone thin. Mrs. Whitaker set her pie down on the table as carefully as if it were fragile glass. Maria wiped her hands on a towel and took a small step closer. Grant shifted his weight and looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Which for a banker is saying something. Frank. The mayor tried again. Maybe Mason can. Dad lifted his palm. A stop sign of a gesture. He didn't look at the mayor. He looked at me. And I saw it then. The thing I had refused to name. Because naming it would make it permanent. He wasn't arguing policy. He was mourning. Mourning the outline of a world that fit him exactly and resented being resized. My anger softened a degree. Which is the most dangerous temperature change in any argument. It makes you think you can fix feelings with facts. I reached into my jacket. The papers felt heavier than a few ounces should. I had folded them twice to fit the inside pocket. The edge had a groove where it had pressed against the stitching while I worked. While I slept. While I practiced the sentence I would say when I handed them over. I unfolded them now. Crisp in the light that filtered through canvas and dust motes. People leaned in without meaning to. You can feel a hinge about to swing even if you don't know which way the door opens. I brought these today, I said. Holding the papers at chest height, so only the front rows could make out the notary stamp. They're the transfer documents. I came here planning to sign the farm back to you and Mom. Debt-free. Systems in place. Staff trained. Contracts secured. I wanted you to have it as a gift. Not an argument. A collective inhale. The kind that makes a tent float a millimeter. Deb blinked. For a tiny fraction of a second. His hand moved toward me. Toward the paper. Toward an ending we might have written together. Tyler's voice slid in like a blade between ribs. So you get your victory lap and then you walk, he said. You turn us into your project and then you. What? Go back to Seattle. I didn't look at him. I go wherever, I'm not required to prove the same thing every Sunday. Mom finally raised her head. Her eyes were glass bright. Boys, she said. And the word tried to gather us back into a smaller room where this could be solved with pie and patience. But we weren't boys. And the room was a tent filled with our neighbors. I looked at my mother for one count. I looked at the line of customers. I looked at the mayor holding a ribbon that had become a prop nobody knew how to use. I looked at my father, who loved something so much, he couldn't stand to see it shaped by someone else's hands. Even mine. The papers rested against my palm. I could feel their fibers under my thumb like wood grain. If I signed, it would mean one thing. If I didn't, it would mean another. If I did the third thing, the thing my body was already preparing to do, it would mean a third truth no one in this tent was ready to hear. The band out by the gazebo hit a wrong note and recovered. A breeze slipped under the canvas and lifted the corner of the page. I tightened my grip. And in the hush, before the next sound, every ear bent toward the stage, as if the whole town had leaned closer to a door that was just about to open. I didn't speak first. I let the paper do it. I took the top corner in my left hand, the bottom in my right, and tore. The rip sounded small in the tent, a zipper. A seam giving way, but it carried because everyone had been holding their breath. The halves fluttered like startled birds. I tore them again. 4 pieces. Then 8. Then a snow of white that wasn't festive and wasn't accidental. Someone gasped. Someone else laughed the way you laugh when your team fumbles on the 1-yard line, disbelief wearing a costume. You're right, I said. And it was almost gentle. I changed everything. I looked at Dad because it had to be him. Good news. Then? You'll get your old farm back. A murmur moved through the rows like a weather line. The mayor lowered the ribbon with a look that asked, silently, whether this counted as a ceremony. Mrs. Whitaker's hands hovered over her pie as if she could put the moment back together if she didn't blink. Grant from the bank shook his head once. Very slightly. Like a man who'd seen a barn catch and knew what came next. Dad's eyes went to the torn paper. Then to me. Then away to the tent pole as if the pole had requested an explanation. What are you doing? He asked. But it wasn't a question. It was the sort of sentence you say when you realize the map you've been using is for another state. I'm done, I said. There it was. Plain. I stepped back from the mic and let the PA swallow the feedback without flinching. I put the pieces of paper into my pocket the way you pocket a receipt you won't need. Then I turned away from the stage. Son, Mom said behind me. And the word almost turned me back. Almost. I kept moving through the aisle as people tried to stand without blocking me and failed because it's hard to coordinate when your heart is beating in your ears. Tyler watched me go with triumph that looked enough like relief to make me wonder what exactly he thought he'd won. At the edge of the tent, the light changed from canvas filtered to honest sky. I stepped into it and felt the sun land on my face like a decision confirmed. The farm stand line parted and then closed. Someone said my name like a question. I walked to the truck. The door handle was hot. I opened it and set the pieces of paper on the passenger seat. The little red ribbon I'd folded that morning was still in my jacket pocket. I took it out and put it next to the torn transfer, like a timeline then and now. The cab smelled like dust and spilled coffee and the faint tang of fertilizer that rides every vehicle on a farm, whether you want it to or not. Mason. Erin stood by the front bumper. Hands out like she was approaching a skittish animal. The Northfield badge still hung from her jacket. Is everything? Deliveries are on schedule, I said. Maria and Jose have authority to make calls. If they need to push a dock time by an hour, take their text. Not mine. Her eyes flicked to the tent. Then back. Are they staying? As long as they want. She nodded. Okay. That's okay. A beat. You're good at this. Whatever this next version is, you'll be good at that too. It sounded like pity until I saw it was respect from a person who dealt in the concrete. Thank you, I said. And meant the whole decade without explaining it. Maria was next. Moving fast enough to be out of breath. Jaffe, she started. Then corrected herself because I'd asked her 100 times not to call me that. Mason. The crew, what do we tell them? Tell them the truth, I said. Opération continue. You and Jose are co-managers. The calendar on the office wall holds. The bonuses I promised at season's end honored. I pulled an envelope from the glove box. I'd made it in case the festival went well or badly. Because some decisions need to be ready for both. This is the written authorization I filed with the attorney. It covers payroll, purchasing thresholds, safety. You don't need my signature for the next 3 months. After that, you'll know whether you want mine again. She took the envelope like it contained a fragile animal. And you, I'm stepping back. I said. Not disappearing. If the pump house explodes, call me. If a buyer tries to squeeze you with penalties, loop in Erin. If Tyler tries to move the goalposts, tell him to write it on the whiteboard and I'll see it when I see it. She studied my face the way people study a sky they aren't sure about. You kept a lot on your shoulders, she said. I didn't keep it. I said. I carried it because there wasn't anywhere to set it down. I just found a place. She nodded and left because she had to. The line at the stand doesn't pause for epiphanies. Jose lifted a hand from across the gravel. Eyes asking and answering the same question at once. He lifted mine back. We'd talk later. When there wasn't a crowd and there was work to be done. Coward, Tyler said. He'd come up quiet, which surprised me. He usually brought sound. You didn't like the heat, so you're ducking out. I turned and leaned against the open door. You want the heat? Step into the kitchen. The schedule is on the whiteboard. Start with Tuesday. Call Ridgeview about the herb specification. They're going to want the bundles tighter. Then take the tractor to Pete because the PTO's making a noise I don't like. After that, write the CSA update, email, and include the kale recipe, or we'll get 10 messages about what to do with it. His smirk faltered. I was talking about being a man. I know. I said. I was talking about being responsible. Dad arrived then. Not rushing. Just moving with purpose, like he had when there was a calf to pull. And no time for commentary. He stopped on the other side of the door. Up close. He looked older than he had on the stage, like the light had changed there. 2. You made your point. He said. I made my boundary. I said. There's a difference. You think walking off is leadership. I think staying and letting you say I ruined what I built is cruelty. I said. To me. To the crew. To the parts of this farm that need quiet instead of noise. He looked at the seat where the ribbon and the torn papers sat like a still life. You were going to give it back, he said. As if he'd only just believed the words I'd said on stage. Yeah. I said. I was. Why not now? Because the story you're telling needs a villain. I said. And I felt the tiredness of it. Marrow deep. If I give it back today, the story becomes that I did damage and finally surrendered. That's not true. I built a system that works. If you want it, you can have it. But you'll have to ask for it without calling it a mistake. He flinched. A small reflex he would deny later. You think I'll beg? I think you'll have to tell the truth. I said. To me. To yourself. To the people you've been preaching to at the cafe. The wind flipped the corner of the ribbon. In the tent, the mayor's voice rallied and began handing out awards to kids who had brought the fattest pumpkins. Life, which is rude in its persistence, went on. Mom reached us. Breathless. A hand on my forearm like a tether she could tuck back into her pocket if I lurched. Please, she said. Don't leave angry. I'm not angry, I said. And it surprised me to hear that it was true. I wasn't calm. I wasn't happy. But the heat had bled away with the decision. I'm tired of proving something that the numbers have already proved. Her fingers tightened. Then eased. If I make supper tomorrow, she said. Will you come? Yes, I said. If we talk like 3 people who love the same place in different ways. 2 less gaffel. Make it 4. He said. I love it too. Then show up Tuesday, I said. And watched him decide whether to turn the joke into a commitment. He stared past me at the fields because the right now of work is always harder than the someday of legacy. I climbed into the truck. The seat creaked. The key turned. The engine caught. Then settled. Dad put a hand on the doorframe and leaned in. Not to stop me, but to say a last thing before the new era began. You always have an answer. Mason, he said. Maybe that's the problem. Or maybe it's why we're still here. I said. I lifted his hand off the frame and set it back by his side. Not unkindly. Take care of Mom. Take care of the people who show up. The rest will sort itself. I eased the truck out of the row. Past the stacks of empty strawberry flats. Past the welcome Harvest Festival banner that sagged a little at one corner. Past the kids, leading calves with ribbons braided into halters. At the exit, I pulled over, put the truck in park, and took the torn papers and the red ribbon into my hands. I opened the glove box and placed the ribbon inside. Right on top of the vehicle registration. I rolled the window down and let the paper pieces catch the breeze back into the cab where they would flit and bother me until I cleaned them up. Reminders that some messes you keep until you make them neat on purpose. I drove. The road away from town runs along the irrigation canal for 2 miles. Then turns past a stand of cottonwoods that holds the memory of every hot July. My phone buzzed on the seat. I lit it. At the first pullout that looked over our west fields. I stopped. From there, you can see the greenhouse glint. The straight lines of beds like sheet music. The house roof I paid for, shining a humble silver. A hawk rode the thermal above the far pasture. The ditch water shone like a blade. I thought about the first night in the office when I wrote day 1 at the top of the notebook page. I thought about the part numbers inked on my arm. The heater that arrived late. The way Maria says good, like she's calling the day in from a field. I thought about Grandpa's pegboard and the way Dad's hands used to lift a sack like it was a friend. Not a load. I let the whole decade pour through me and didn't try to catch it. My phone stopped buzzing. Then it buzzed again. A text from Jose: we got it. We're set. Come by later. Then another from Aaron: doc schedule holds. Proud to partner with you. One from an unknown number. This is Walt. Inspector says demo was right. Sorry if I made it messy. And finally, one from Mom: supper tomorrow at 6. I'll make your favorite. Your father will listen. I typed back to Jose: proud of you. Call if you need anything. To Aaron: thank you. You know where to find me. To Mom: I'll be there. I didn't reply to Dad. I hadn't texted. That felt correct. By dusk, I checked into the motel by the highway, the one with the glowing sign that hums at night, and a carpet pattern from a decade that forgot about shame. I showered until the water turned lukewarm, and then sat on the bed, with a legal pad, because old habits reach for tools. At the top I wrote. Not day 1. Different map. Under it. Lines. Let the managers run. Send the attorney, the trustee draft if needed. Look at consultant opportunities that don't require selling your 20s again. Call Grant about restructuring ownership so the farm can't be used as ammo in a family argument. Bring flowers to Mom that aren't from our own fields so she can be surprised. When sleep finally came, it arrived like it hadn't forgiven me for making it wait. In the morning, I drove back to the farm early enough to be invisible. I parked by the willow and watched the crew clock in. Maria clipped the day's schedule to the board. Jose set cones by the loading area. Tuller didn't show. And I made myself not put meaning where there might only be habit. Dad stood on the porch a long time. Then went inside. The greenhouse fans kicked on. The irrigation controller blinked its green. Indifferent blink. I turned the truck around. At the lane, I stopped by the cedar sign we'd burned our name into. A spider had run a thread from the top of the heart to the bottom of farm. It trembled in the small breeze. I reached out to break it. Then didn't. Not everything is mine to tidy anymore. I drove toward town and a breakfast I didn't have to eat standing up. That night at 6. I knocked on my parents' door instead of walking in. Mom opened it with flour on her cheek and hugged me too hard. Dad sat at the table. He didn't stand. He gestured toward the chair across from him, like a man hosting a meeting he wasn't sure he wanted. We ate in quiet, that was not quite peace, and not quite truce. Halfway through, he cleared his throat. You've done good work, he said. Each word measured like seed from an old hand spreader. I don't like all of it. I might never. But it's good work. I didn't do it alone, I said. He nodded once. I know. We didn't solve it all. You don't fix a decade with a sentence. But the fight changed shape. It left the tent and came into a room where 3 people could look at it without a microphone. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, a real letter. Not a bill. It was from a high school kid who'd worked 1 season and was heading to college. I learned that farming is planning and stubbornness. He wrote. I learned to be on time. I learned that sometimes you pull the old thing down so nobody gets hurt. I put the letter in the glove box next to the red ribbon. 2 souvenirs from different kinds of fairs. If you're waiting for a line about forgiveness. I don't have it tidy yet. What I do have is distance and a view of the fields that keeps changing as the sun moves. I have a crew that can run without me watching. I have a father who may never love the way I build, but who, for the first time, I didn't try to sand my name off the thing I held up. I have a mother who sets one more place at the table without asking who's right. And I have a farm that is still here. Solvent. Messy. Alive. Not perfect. Resilient. Was I wrong to rip the papers? Ask 10 people at the festival, and you'll get 12 answers. Here's mine. I didn't tear up a gift. I tore up a story that made the gift untrue. The right story, the one where we keep each other honest and the farm safe, might still get written. It will be quieter than a tent full of neighbors. It will have fewer speeches. It will probably happen on a Tuesday at 6 a.m. while someone checks a controller light and someone else ties twine around a bundle of herbs just right. If you've ever stood in front of a crowd and realized you could either explain your life or live it, you know the choice I made. I climbed in the truck. I set down what needed setting down.